Hello, my dear friends. Before we begin our story, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps our fairy tales come to life. Today, I will tell you the wonderful Soviet fairy tale, The Golden Key, or The Adventures of Buratino. It's a magical story about a wooden boy named Buratino, who was carved from a log by Papa Carlo. Together with his friends, he goes on an incredible journey full of secrets, dangers, and amazing discoveries. So get comfortable and let's dive into the world of this beautiful tale. Long, long ago, in a little town on the shore of the Mediterranean Sea, there lived an old carpenter named Giuseppe, nicknamed Grey Nose. One day, a log happened to fall into his hands. Just an ordinary log, the kind people use to keep the fireplace burning in winter. Not a bad thing, Giuseppe said to himself. I could make something out of it, maybe a leg for a table. Giuseppe put on his spectacles, tied together with a bit of string, for they were very old, turned the log over in his hands, and began to hew it with his little axe. But no sooner had he started than an unusually thin little voice squeaked, Oh, please be careful." Giuseppe pushed his glasses down to the tip of his nose and looked around the workshop. Nobody. He peered under the workbench. Nobody. He looked into the basket of shavings. Nobody. He poked his head out the door. Nobody in the street. Could I have imagined it? Thought Giuseppe. Who could have squeaked like that? He picked up the axe again, and once more, just as he struck the log. Ow! That hurts, I tell you! The tiny voice wailed. This time Giuseppe was truly frightened. His spectacles even grew misty with sweat. He searched every corner of the room, even crawled into the fireplace and craned his neck to look up the chimney. Nobody there. Perhaps I drank something strange, and now my ears are ringing, he wondered. No, today he had drunk nothing unusual. Feeling a little calmer, Giuseppe took up his plane, tapped it with a hammer so that the blade stuck out just enough. Not too much, not too little. He set the log upon the workbench and began to plane it. Ow, 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 ow! Stop pinching me! The thin little voice cried in despair. Giuseppe dropped the plane, stumbled backward, and sat down on the floor. At last he guessed that the tiny voice was coming from inside the log. Just then, an old friend of Giuseppe's came to visit, an organ grinder named Carlo. Once upon a time, Carlo, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, would travel from town to town with his fine barrel organ, earning his bread by singing and playing music. But now Carlo was old and ill, and his barrel organ had long since been broken. Good day, Giuseppe, he said, stepping into the workshop. Why are you sitting there on the floor? Oh, you see, I lost a little screw. Ah, never mind it, Giuseppe replied, glancing sideways at the log. And you, old friend, how are you living these days? Badly, Carlo sighed. I keep wondering how I might earn a crust of bread. If only you could help me or give me some advice. Nothing could be simpler, Giuseppe said cheerfully, while thinking to himself, now's my chance to be rid of this cursed log. Nothing simpler. You see that fine log lying there on the workbench? Take it, Carlo, and bring it home with you. Carlo answered sadly. And what then? I'll carry the log home, but I don't even have a fireplace in my little room. I'm speaking sense, Carlo. Take a knife, carve a puppet out of this log, teach it to say funny words, sing, and dance. Then take it around the courtyards. You'll earn yourself a piece of bread and a glass of wine. At that very moment, from the workbench where the log lay, a merry little voice squeaked, Bravo! Splendid idea, Grey Nose. Giuseppe began trembling with fear again, but Carlo only looked around in surprise, wondering where the voice had come from. Well then, thank you, Giuseppe, for the advice. Come now, give me your log, Carlo said. Giuseppe quickly snatched up the log and thrust it into his friend's hands. But whether he handed it clumsily, or whether the log itself gave a jump, it struck Carlo on the head. "Ah, so these are your gifts!" Carlo cried in offense. "Forgive me, old friend, it wasn't I who struck you." "What? Do you mean I struck myself on the head?" No, my friend. It must have been the log itself that hit you." "Lies! It was you who hit me." "No, not I." "I always knew you were a drunkard, Grey Nose," said Carlo. "And now I see you're also a liar." "Ah, so you would insult me," cried Giuseppe. "Come here and say that closer." "No, you come here. I'll grab you by the nose." The two old men puffed up with anger and rushed at each other. Carlo seized Giuseppe by his gray nose. Giuseppe grabbed Carlo by the white hair growing near his ears. Then they began boxing each other soundly in the ribs. Meanwhile, the piercing little voice on the workbench squeaked and egged them on. "Hit him! Hit him harder!" At last, the old men grew tired and out of breath. "Let's make peace, shall we?" Giuseppe said. "Well, all right, let's make peace," Carlo agreed. The old men kissed one another. Carlo tucked the log under his arm and went home. Carlo lived in a tiny room under the staircase, where he had nothing at all, except for a beautiful fireplace painted on the wall opposite the door. But the fireplace, and the fire inside it, and the little pot boiling over the flames, none of it was real. They were only painted on a piece of old canvas. Carlo entered his room, sat down on the only chair at a legless table, and, turning the log this way and that, began to carve a puppet with his knife. What should I name him? Carlo wondered. I shall call him Buratino. This name will bring me luck. I once knew a whole family. All of them were called Buratino. The father was Buratino, the mother was Buratino, and the children too were Buratino. They all lived merry and carefree lives. First he carved the puppet's hair, then the forehead, then the eyes. Suddenly, the eyes opened all by themselves and stared straight at him. Carlo pretended not to be frightened. Instead, he asked gently, "Wooden Eyes, why are you looking at me so strangely?" But the puppet said nothing, most likely because it did not yet have a mouth. Carlo shaved the cheeks, then carved a nose, just an ordinary nose. But suddenly, the nose began to stretch, to grow, until it became so long and sharp that Carlo even grunted, "That's no good, much too long." He tried to trim the tip of the nose, but no, the nose wriggled, twisted, and stayed just as it was, long, curious, and sharp. Carlo went on to the mouth, but the moment he carved the lips, the mouth opened at once. He, ha ha ha, and out slipped a narrow red tongue, teasing and mocking. Carlo, paying no attention to these tricks, went on planing, cutting, and shaping. He made the puppet a chin, a neck, shoulders, a body, arms. But as soon as he finished the very last finger, Buratino began drumming his little fists on Carlo's bald head, pinching and tickling him. "Listen here," Carlo said sternly. "I haven't even finished making you yet, and already you're playing pranks. What will happen next, eh?" He looked at Buratino with a strict gaze, and Buratino, with his round eyes, stared back at Papa Carlo like a little mouse. Carlo made him long legs out of wooden splinters with big feet. At last, the work was finished. He set the wooden boy down on the floor to teach him how to walk. Buratino swayed a little on his thin legs, took one step, then another, hop, hop, straight to the door, over the threshold, and out into the street. Carlo, worried, went after him. "Hey, you little rascal, come back!" But there was no catching him. Buratino ran down the street like a rabbit, his wooden soles going tuck, 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 tuck on the cobblestones. "Stop him! Catch him!" shouted Carlo. Passers-by laughed, pointing at the running Buratino. At the crossroads stood a huge policeman with twirled mustaches and a three-cornered hat. When he saw the wooden boy running, he spread his legs wide, blocking the whole street. Buratino tried to dart between them, but the policeman caught him by the nose and held him until Papa Carlo arrived. "Just wait, I'll deal with you properly," Carlo muttered, shoving Buratino under his arm and trying to tuck him into the pocket of his jacket. But Buratino had no wish, on such a bright and merry day, to stick out of a pocket upside down before the whole crowd. He wriggled free, flopped onto the pavement, and lay still, pretending to be dead. "Oh dear, said the policeman. "This looks like serious trouble." People began to gather. Looking at Buratino lying motionless, they shook their heads. "Poor thing," some said. "He must have died of hunger." "Carlo beat him to death," others whispered. "That old organ grinder only pretends to be a good man. In truth, he is cruel, he is wicked." Hearing this, the mustached policeman grabbed the unfortunate Carlo by the collar and dragged him off to the police station. Carlo scuffed his shoes along the ground and groaned loudly. Oh, what grief I've brought upon myself, making a wooden boy." When the street was empty again, Buratino lifted his nose, looked around, and hopped away merrily toward home. Running back to the little room under the stairs, Buratino plopped down on the floor by the leg of the chair. What else could I think of to do? Do not forget, this was only the very first day since Buratino was born. His thoughts were tiny, short, and ever so trivial. At that moment he heard, "Curry, curry, 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 curry." Buratino turned his head, looking all around the room. "Hey, who's there?" "I am," came the reply. "Curry, curry." Buratino saw a creature, a little like a cockroach, but with the head of a grasshopper. It sat on the wall above the fireplace, chirping softly, "Curry, curry," staring with bulging, glassy rainbow eyes, and twitching its feelers. "Hey, who are you?" "I am the talking cricket," said the creature. "I have lived in this room for more than 100 years. I'm the master here. Get out of my house." "Very well, I will go, though it saddens me to leave the room where I have lived 100 years," the talking cricket answered. "But before I go, listen to some good advice." "Oh, as if I need advice from an old cricket." "Ah, Buratino, Buratino," the cricket said gravely. "Stop your mischief. Obey Carlo. Do not run away from home without reason, and tomorrow you must begin to go to school. That is my advice. Otherwise, dreadful dangers and terrible adventures await you. For your life, I would not give even a dead dry fly." Why?" asked Buratino. "You will see why soon enough," the talking cricket replied. "Ah, you 100-year-old bug cockroach," cried Buratino. "The thing I love most in the world is dreadful adventures. Tomorrow at dawn, I'll run away from home, climb over fences, raid birds' nests, tease the boys, and pull dogs and cats by their tails. I'll think of even better tricks than that." Poor Buratino, sighed the cricket. "You will shed bitter tears." Why?" Buratino asked again. "Because you have a foolish wooden head." Then Buratino leapt onto the chair, from the chair onto the table, seized a hammer, and hurled it at the talking cricket's head. The old wise cricket gave a heavy sigh, twitched his feelers, and crawled away behind the fireplace, leaving that room forever. After the incident with the talking cricket, the little room under the stairs became terribly boring. The day dragged on and on. Buratino's stomach was bored too. He closed his eyes and suddenly saw a roasted chicken on a plate. He opened his eyes quickly, The chicken had vanished. He closed his eyes again. Now he saw a plate of semolina porridge with raspberry jam. He opened his eyes. No plate of porridge was there either. Then Buratino realized that he was terribly hungry. He ran to the fireplace and poked his long nose into the little pot boiling over the fire. But his long nose went straight through the pot because, as we know, the fireplace, the fire, the smoke, and the pot were all painted by poor Carlo on a piece of old canvas. Buratino pulled his nose out and peered through the hole. Behind the canvas in the wall there seemed to be a small door, but it was so covered in cobwebs that he could see nothing. Buratino began rummaging through every corner, hoping to find a crust of bread or a chicken bone gnawed by the cat. Alas, poor Carlo had stored nothing at all for supper. Suddenly, he spotted a chicken egg in the basket of shavings. He grabbed it, set it on the windowsill, and tapped it with his nose, tuk-tuk, breaking the shell. Inside the egg, a little voice squeaked, "Thank you, wooden little fellow." Out of the broken shell came a chick with a fluffy tail and bright, merry eyes. "Goodbye. Mother hen has been waiting for me in the yard," chirped the chick and hopped out the window. And that was all anyone saw of him. Oh, cried Buratino, "I'm hungry." At last, the day stopped dragging. Twilight fell over the little room. Buratino sat by the painted fireplace, hiccuping quietly from hunger. He noticed a fat head peeking out from under the stairs, from under the floor. It sniffed, and a gray animal with short legs emerged. It walked slowly to the basket of shavings, sniffing and rustling angrily, surely looking for the egg Buratino had broken. Then it came out of the basket and approached Buratino. It sniffed him, twirling its black nose with 4 long whiskers on each side. Buratino did not smell like food, so it passed by, dragging a long thin tail behind it. Well, how could he not grab that tail? Buratino grabbed it at once. It was the old, wicked rat, Shushara. Frightened, she dashed like a shadow under the stairs, dragging Buratino with her. But when she saw he was only a wooden boy, she turned and, furious, leaped at him, aiming to bite his throat. Now Buratino was truly frightened. He let go of the cold rat's tail and jumped onto a chair. The rat followed. From the chair he leapt onto the windowsill. The rat followed. From the windowsill he flew across the little room onto the table. The rat followed. And then, on the table, she seized Buratino by the throat, knocked him over, held him in her teeth, jumped to the floor, and dragged him under the stairs into the crawl space. "Papa Carlo!" Buratino squeaked. "I'm here," a loud voice answered. The door swung open, and Papa Carlo entered. He pulled off a wooden shoe from his foot and hurled it at the rat. Shushara let go of the wooden boy, chattered her teeth, and disappeared. "This is what mischief leads to," grumbled Papa Carlo, lifting Buratino from the floor. He checked that everything was intact. He set him on his knees, took an onion from his pocket, peeled it. "Here, eat." Buratino bit hungrily into the onion, crunching and smacking his lips. Then he rubbed his head against Papa Carlo's bristly cheek. "I will be clever and sensible, Papa Carlo. The talking cricket told me to go to school." "Well thought out, little one. Papa Carlo, but I'm naked, wooden. The boys at school will laugh at me." "Aha," said Carlo, scratching his bristly chin. "You're right, little one." He lit a lamp, took scissors, glue, and scraps of colored paper. He cut and glued a little jacket from brown paper and bright green trousers. He made shoes from an old bootleg and a little hat, a cap with a tassel, from an old sock. He put it all on Buratino. "Wear it in good health." "Papa Carlo," said Buratino, "how will I go to school without a primer?" "Aha, you're right, little one." Papa Carlo scratched the back of his head. He draped his only old coat over Buratino's shoulders and went outside. He returned shortly, but without the coat. In his hand, he held a book with big letters and interesting pictures. "Here's a primer for you. Study well." "Papa Carlo, where's your coat?" "I sold the coat." "Never mind. I'll manage without. Only you live well, my little one." Buratino buried his nose in Papa Carlo's kind hands. "I'll learn, I'll grow up, and I'll buy you 1,000 new coats." That first evening in his life, Buratino wanted with all his heart to live sensibly, without mischief, just as the talking cricket had instructed him. Early in the morning, Buratino packed his primer into his little bag and hopped along on his way to school. Along the way, he did not glance at the sweets displayed in the shop windows. Little triangular poppy seed pastries, sweet buns, and rooster-shaped lollipops on sticks. He didn't want to look at the boys flying their paper kites either. A striped cat named Basilio crossed the street, one he could have grabbed by the tail. But Buratino resisted the temptation. The closer he got to school, the louder the cheerful music sounded nearby, along the shore of the Mediterranean Sea. "Pee, pee, pee," squeaked the flute. "La, la, la, la," sang the violin. "Ding, ding," jingled the cymbals. "Boom," banged the drum. He needed to turn right to reach school, but the music was coming from the left. Buratino stumbled. His own legs were turning toward the sea, where pee, 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 ding la la, ding la la, boom. "The school won't run away," Buratino said to himself loudly, shaking his head. "I'll just take a quick look, listen a bit, and then run straight to school." With all his might, he dashed toward the sea. There he saw a canvas theater decorated with colorful flags fluttering in the sea breeze. At the top of the theater, 4 musicians were dancing and playing. Below, a cheerful, smiling lady sold tickets. At the entrance, a large crowd had gathered, boys and girls, soldiers, lemonade sellers, nurses with babies, firemen, postmen. Everyone was reading a big poster, "Puppet Theater, only one performance. Hurry, hurry, hurry." Buratino tugged at the sleeve of a boy. "Excuse me, please, how much is a ticket?" The boy replied slowly through his teeth, "4 soldi, little wooden fellow." "You see, boy, I forgot my purse at home. Could you lend me 4 soldi?" The boy whistled with scorn. "Found a fool! I really, really, really want to see the puppet theater," Buratino said through his tears. "Buy my wonderful little jacket for 4 soldi. A paper jacket for 4 soldi? Look elsewhere for a fool." "Then my pretty little cap. Your cap is only good for catching tadpoles. Look elsewhere for a fool." Buratino's nose even grew cold. He wanted to get into the theater so badly. "Then, boy, take my new primer for 4 soldi. With pictures. With wonderful pictures and big letters." "All right then," said the boy, took the primer, and reluctantly counted out 4 soldi. Buratino ran to the cheerful, smiling lady and squeaked, "Listen, give me a ticket in the front row for the one and only performance of the puppet theater." Buratino sat in the front row, eyes wide with excitement, staring at the lowered curtain. On the curtain were painted dancing little people, girls wearing black masks, frightening bearded men in pointed hats with stars, a sun that looked like a pancake with a nose and eyes, and other entertaining pictures. The bell rang 3 times, and the curtain rose. On the small stage, cardboard trees stood to the right and left. Above them hung a lantern shaped like the moon, reflecting in a piece of mirror, where 2 swans made of cotton with golden beaks floated. From behind one cardboard tree, a little man appeared, wearing a long white shirt with long sleeves. His face was dusted with powder, white as tooth powder. He bowed to the distinguished audience and said sadly, "Hello, my name is Piero. Today we will perform a comedy called The Girl with Blue Hair, or 33 Slaps on the Head. I will be beaten with a stick, slapped, and given gentle taps on the head. It is a very funny comedy. From behind another cardboard tree, another man jumped out, all checkered like a chessboard. He bowed to the audience. "Hello, I am Harlequin." Then he turned to Pierrot and gave him 2 slaps so sharp that the powder fell from Pierrot's cheeks. "Why are you whining, fool?" "I am sad because I want to get married," Pierrot replied. "And why haven't you married?" "Because my bride ran away from me." "Ha ha ha!" Harlequin laughed, rolling with amusement. "Look at this silly fellow." He grabbed a stick and tapped Pierrot. "What is your bride's name?" "You won't fight anymore?" "No, I've just begun." "In that case, her name is Malvina, or the girl with blue hair." "Ha ha ha!" laughed Harlequin again, giving Pierrot 3 gentle taps on the head. "Listen, dear audience, are there even girls with blue hair?" But then, turning to the audience, he suddenly saw a wooden boy in the front row, mouth wide open in a grin, long nose, wearing a little cap with a tassel. "Look, it's Buratino!" Harlequin shouted, pointing at him. "A living Buratino!" Pierrot yelled, waving his long sleeves. From behind the cardboard trees, many puppets appeared. Girls in black masks, scary bearded men in hats, furry dogs with button eyes, hunchbacks with cucumber-like noses. They all ran to the candles along the edge of the stage and, peering closely, chattered, "It's Buratino, it's Buratino. Come to us, merry little rascal Buratino." Then he jumped from a bench onto the prompter's box, and from there onto the stage. The puppets grabbed him, hugged him, kissed him, pinched him. Then all the puppets began singing the bird polka. The little bird danced the polka in the early hour on the meadow. Beak to the left, tail to the right. This is Carabas polka. 2 beetles on the drum, the frog blows the double bass. Beak to the left, tail to the right. This is Barabbas polka. The little bird danced the polka because she was happy. Beak to the left, tail to the right, and that's how the polka went. The audience was moved. One nurse even shed a tear. A fireman wept loudly. Only the boys in the back benches were angry, stomping their feet. "Enough with the kisses! We're not little kids. Continue the show!" Hearing all the noise, a terrifying man appeared from behind the stage, so fearsome that just a glance at him could freeze you with terror. His thick, uncombed beard dragged along the floor, his bulging eyes rolled, and his huge mouth snapped his teeth as if he were a crocodile. In his hand, he held a 7-tailed whip. This was the master of the puppet theater, Doctor of Puppet Sciences, Signor Carabas Barabas. "Ha ha ha! Goo goo goo!" he roared at Buratino. "So it is you who interrupted the performance of my wonderful comedy." He seized Buratino, carried him to the theater storage, and hung him on a nail. Returning, he brandished the 7-tailed whip at the puppets to continue the show. The puppets managed to finish the comedy somehow. The curtain fell, and the audience left. Signor Carabas Barabas went to the kitchen for dinner. Tucking the bottom of his beard into his pocket so it wouldn't get in the way, he sat in front of the fireplace, where a whole rabbit and 2 chickens roasted on a spit. He poked the roast with his fingers. It seemed raw. There was little wood in the fireplace. Then he clapped his hands 3 times. Harlequin and Pierrot rushed in. "Bring me that lazybones Buratino," said Signor Carabas Barabas. "He's made of dry wood. I'll toss him into the fire and my roast will cook quickly." Harlequin and Pierrot fell to their knees, begging mercy for the poor Buratino. "Where is my whip?" shouted Carabas Barabas. Then, crying, they went to the storage, took Buratino down from the nail, and dragged him to the kitchen. When the puppets dragged Buratino and dropped him on the floor by the fireplace grate, Signor Carabas Barabas, snorting and puffing, stirred the embers with a poker. Suddenly, his eyes filled with blood, his nose and then his whole face scrunched into deep wrinkles. Surely a piece of coal had flown up his nostrils. "Up! Up! 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 Chee!" howled Carabas Barabas, rolling his eyes, and he sneezed so violently that ash shot up in a column from the fireplace. Once the doctor of puppet sciences began sneezing, he could not stop, sneezing 50, sometimes even 100 times in a row. Such extraordinary sneezing would leave him exhausted, and strangely, a little kinder. Piero whispered secretly to Buratino, "Try talking to him between sneezes." "Apchee! Apchee!" Carabas Barabas sucked in air with his gaping mouth and sneezed with a crash, shaking his head and stamping his feet. The whole kitchen rattled. Glass clinked. Pots and pans wobbled on their hooks. Between sneezes, Buratino began to whimper in a small, plaintive voice. "Poor me, unlucky me, nobody cares for me." "Stop whining," shouted Carabas Barabas. "You're bothering me." "Apchee!" "Bless you, Signor," sniffled Buratino. "Thank you. Are your parents alive?" "Apchee! I never ever had a mother, Signor." "Ah, I am so unhappy," Buratino cried so piercingly that it felt like needles in Carabas Barabas's ears. He stomped his feet. "Stop squealing, I say! Apchee! And your father, is he alive?" "My poor father is still alive, Signor. I can imagine how he will feel to know that I roasted a rabbit and 2 chickens on you." "Apchee! My poor father will soon die from hunger and cold anyway. I am his only support in old age. Have mercy, please, Signor." 10,000 devils!" roared Carabas Barabas. "No mercy. The rabbit and chickens must be roasted. Climb into the fireplace." "Signor, I cannot do it." "Why not?" asked Carabas Barabas, only so that Buratino would keep talking instead of squealing in his ears. "Signor, I already tried to put my nose in the fireplace once and only poked a hole." "What nonsense!" exclaimed Carabas Barabas. "How could you poke a hole in the fireplace with your nose?" "Because, Signor, the fireplace and the pot above the fire were painted on an old canvas." "Apchee!" Carabas Barabas sneezed so loudly that Piero flew to the left, Harlequin to the right, and Buratino spun like a top. "Where did you see a fireplace fire and pot painted on a piece of canvas?" "In my father Carlo's little room." "Your father is Carlo." Carabas Barabas jumped from his chair, waving his hands, beard flying. "So it is in old Carlo's room that there is a secret." But Carabas Barabas, not wanting to reveal the secret, pressed both fists to his mouth. He sat for a while, eyes wide, staring at the dying fire. "Very well," he said at last. "I will have dinner with the undercooked rabbit and raw chickens." "I give you your life, Buratino, but that's not all." He reached under his beard into his vest pocket, pulled out 5 gold coins, and handed them to Buratino. "Not only that, take this money to Carlo, bow and tell him I beg him not to die of hunger or cold, and most importantly, not to leave his little room where the fireplace is painted on the old canvas. Go, get some sleep, and early tomorrow run home." Buratino put the 5 gold coins into his pocket and replied with a polite bow, "Thank you, Signor. You could not have trusted the money to more reliable hands." Harlequin and Piero led Buratino to the puppet bedroom, where the puppets again began hugging, kissing, pushing, pinching, and embracing Buratino, who had somehow narrowly escaped a terrible fate in the fireplace. He whispered to the puppets, "There is some kind of secret here." Early in the morning, Buratino counted his coins, 5 gold pieces, 1 for each finger. Clutching them tightly in his fist, he hopped along the road home, singing to himself, "I'll buy Papa Carlo a new coat. I'll buy lots of poppy seed triangles and candy roosters on sticks. When the puppet theater's canvas tent and fluttering flags disappeared from view, he saw two beggars trudging along the dusty road, Alice the fox, hobbling on 3 legs, and Basilio the blind cat. This was not the same cat Buratino had met yesterday, but another, also striped, also named Basilio. Buratino wanted to pass quietly, but Alice the fox looked at him sweetly. "Hello, dear Buratino. Where are you rushing off to?" "Home to Papa Carlo," he replied. The fox sighed even more pitifully. "I don't know if you will find poor Carlo alive. He's so weak from hunger and cold." "You saw it?" Buratino opened his fist and showed her the 5 gold coins. Seeing the money, the fox instinctively reached out her paw, and the cat suddenly opened his blind eyes wide, and they gleamed like 2 green lanterns. But Buratino noticed nothing. "Dear, pretty Buratino, what will you do with this money?" asked the fox. "I'll buy a coat for Papa Carlo. I'll buy a new alphabet book." "An alphabet book? Oh, oh," said Alice the fox, shaking her head. "It won't do you any good to study. I studied, and look at me. I walk on 3 legs. "An alphabet book," grunted Basilio the cat, snorting angrily. "Because of that cursed learning, I lost an eye." On a dry branch near the road sat an old crow. She listened and listened, then cawed, "They lie, they lie." Basilio the cat immediately leapt high, knocked the crow from the branch with his paw, tore half her tail off, barely letting her fly away. He then pretended again to be blind. "Why did you do that, Basilio?" asked Buratino in surprise. "The eyes are blind," the cat replied. "I thought it was a little dog in the tree." So the 3 continued down the dusty road. The fox said, "Clever, sensible Buratino, would you like to have 10 times more money than you have?" "Of course I would. How is that done?" "As easy as pie. Come with us." "Where?" "To the land of fools." Buratino thought for a moment. "No, I think I'll go home now." "Please, we won't pull you by the rope," said the fox. "Too bad for you if you refuse." "Too bad for you," grunted the cat. "You are your own enemy," said the fox. "You are your own enemy," grunted the cat. "Otherwise, your 5 gold coins could turn into a pile of money." Buratino stopped, mouth agape. "You lie!" The fox sat on her tail, licking her lips. "I will explain. In the land of fools, there is a magic field called the Field of Wonders. On this field, dig a little hole, say 3 times, Crex, Fex, Pex, put a gold coin into the hole, cover it with earth, sprinkle salt on top, water it well, and go to sleep. In the morning, a small tree will grow, and instead of leaves, golden coins will hang from its branches. Do you understand?" Buratino even jumped. "You lie!" "Let's go, Basilio," said the fox, curling her nose in annoyance. "They don't believe us. So be it." "No, no," shouted Buratino. I believe. Let's hurry to the land of fools." Buratino, Alice the fox, and Basilio the cat went down the hill and walked, through fields, vineyards, a pine grove, reached the sea, and then turned away from the sea again, retracing their steps through the same grove and vineyards. The little town on the hill and the sun above it appeared first on the right, then on the left. Alice the fox sighed as she spoke. "Ah, it's not easy to reach the land of fools. You'll wear out all your paws." By evening, they saw an old house with a flat roof on the side of the road, with a sign above the door. "Inn of the 3 Minnows." The innkeeper rushed out to greet them, tore off the little cap from his bald head, and bowed low, inviting them in. "We could use at least a dry crust to eat," said the fox. "Even a piece of bread would do," repeated the cat. They entered the inn and sat near the hearth, where all sorts of foods were roasting on spits and in pans. Alice licked her lips constantly, while Basilio the cat laid his paws on the table, resting his whiskered face on them, staring at the food. "Hey, innkeeper," said Buratino with importance, "give us 3 crusts of bread." The innkeeper almost fell backward in surprise that such distinguished guests asked for so little. "Funny, clever little Buratino is joking with you, innkeeper," giggled the fox. "He's joking," muttered the cat. "Give us 3 crusts of bread, and also that wonderfully roasted little lamb," said the fox, "and that goose, and a couple of pigeons on the spit, and perhaps some baked liver, too." 6 of the fattest carp," commanded the cat, "and some small raw fish for a starter." In short, they took everything that was on the hearth. Only 1 crust of bread remained for Buratino, Alice the fox, and Basilio. The cat devoured everything along with the bones. Their bellies swelled, and their faces glistened. "Let's rest for an hour," said the fox, "and at exactly midnight we'll leave. Don't forget to wake us, innkeeper." The fox and cat collapsed on 2 soft beds, snoring and whistling in their sleep. Buratino dozed in a corner on a dog's bed. He dreamed of a little tree with round, golden leaves. Just as he reached out his hand, "Hey, Signor Buratino, it's time. It's already midnight." There was a knock at the door. Buratino jumped up and rubbed his eyes. On the beds, no cat, no fox, empty. The innkeeper explained, "Your esteemed friends chose to rise earlier, had some cold pie, and left. They didn't leave me any message?" "Oh yes, they did," he said. "That you, Signor Buratino, without wasting a minute, should run along the road to the forest." Buratino rushed to the door, but the innkeeper stood in the doorway squinting, hands on his hips. "And who will pay for dinner?" "Oh," squeaked Buratino, "how much?" "Exactly 1 gold coin." Buratino tried to slip past his legs, but the innkeeper grabbed the spit. His bristly whiskers, and even the hairs above his ears, stood on end. "Pay, scoundrel, or I'll skewer you like a bug." Buratino had no choice but to pay 1 of his 5 gold coins. Fuming, he left the cursed inn. The night was dark, not just dark, but black as soot. Everything around was asleep. Only above Buratino, a night bird, the sleep owl, flew silently. Brushing his nose with her soft wing, the owl repeated, "Don't trust, don't trust, don't trust." Annoyed, he stopped. "What's the matter with you?" "Don't trust the cat and the fox. Bah, to you." He ran on, hearing the sleep owl screech behind him, "Beware of robbers on this road." A greenish light appeared on the edge of the sky. The moon was rising. Ahead, a dark forest came into view. Buratino quickened his pace. Someone behind him also began moving faster. He started running. Someone was chasing him with silent, bounding steps. He looked back. 2 figures were following him. On their heads, they wore sacks with holes cut out for their eyes. One, shorter, waved a knife. The other, taller, held a pistol with a barrel widening like a funnel. "Aye, aye!" squealed Buratino, and like a hare, he dashed toward the dark forest. "Stop! Stop!" shouted the robbers. Though terribly frightened, Buratino realized what to do. He stuffed 4 gold coins into his mouth and turned off the road toward a fence overgrown with brambles. But the 2 robbers grabbed him. "Wallet or life?" Buratino, pretending not to understand, just breathed rapidly through his nose. The robbers shook him by the collar. One threatened with a pistol, the other rifled through his pockets. "Where's your money?" growled the taller one. "Money, you scoundrel," hissed the shorter one. "I'll tear you to pieces. I'll take your head off." Buratino trembled so from fear that the gold coins jingled in his mouth. "There's his money!" howled the robbers. In his mouth! One grabbed Buratino by the head, the other by the legs. They began tossing him up and down. But he clenched his teeth even tighter. Turning him upside down, the robbers banged his head against the ground. Still, it didn't faze him. The shorter robber tried to pry open his teeth with his broad boot. Just as he was about to succeed, Buratino cleverly bit down with all his strength. Only it wasn't a hand, it was a cat's paw. The robber screamed wildly. At that moment, Buratino wriggled like a lizard, darted to the fence, dived into the brambles, leaving pieces of his trousers and jacket on the thorns, scrambled over to the other side, and sprinted toward the forest. At the forest edge, the robbers caught up again. He leapt up, grabbed a swaying branch, and climbed a tree. The robbers followed, but the sacks on their heads hindered them. Climbing to the top, Buratino swung and jumped to the next tree. The robbers followed, but both immediately slipped and thudded to the ground. While they groaned and scratched themselves, Buratino slid down and ran so fast that his legs were a blur. Moonlight cast long shadows from the trees. The entire forest was striped. Buratino disappeared into shadow. Then his white cap flashed in the moonlight. At last, he reached a lake. The moon hung above the mirrored water, like in a puppet theater. Buratino dashed right, splash, left, splash. Behind him, twigs cracked again. Grab him, grab him. The robbers were close, leaping high from the wet grass, trying to catch Buratino. There he is! All that remained was for him to dive into the water. At that moment, he saw a white swan sleeping near the shore, its head tucked under its wing. Buratino plunged into the lake and grabbed the swan by its legs. "Ho ho!" cackled the swan, waking up. "What impudent tricks! Let go of my legs!" The swan spread its enormous wings, and just as the robbers were grabbing Buratino's legs sticking out of the water, the swan majestically flew across the lake. On the far shore, Buratino released its legs, fell, jumped up, and ran across mossy mounds and reeds, straight toward the great moon above the hills. Exhausted, Buratino could barely move his legs, like a fly in autumn on a windowsill. Suddenly, through the hazel branches, he saw a beautiful clearing, and in the middle, a small house lit by the moon, with 4 little windows. The shutters were painted with the sun, the moon, and stars. Around it grew large azure flowers. The paths were sprinkled with fine sand. From a fountain gushed a thin stream of water, and a striped ball danced on it. Buratino crawled onto the porch on all fours. He knocked on the door. Inside it was quiet. He knocked louder. Perhaps they were sound asleep. At that moment, the robbers appeared from the forest again. They had crossed the lake. Water streamed from them in rivulets. Seeing Buratino, the shorter robber hissed nastily like a cat. The taller one barked like a fox. Buratino pounded on the door with hands and feet. "Help! Help, good people!" Then a curly-haired, pretty little girl with a small, upturned nose appeared at the window. Her eyes were closed. "Girl, open the door! Robbers are chasing me!" "Oh, what nonsense," said the girl, yawning with her pretty mouth. "I want to sleep. I can't open my eyes." She raised her hands, stretched sleepily, and disappeared from the window. Buratino, in despair, fell face first into the sand and pretended to be dead. The robbers jumped up. "Aha! Now you won't escape us." It's hard to imagine what tricks they tried to make Buratino open his mouth. If during the chase they hadn't dropped their knife and pistol, that might have been the end of the story of poor Buratino. Finally, the robbers decided to hang him upside down. They tied a rope to his legs, and Buratino dangled from an oak branch. They sat under the oak, stretching their wet tails, waiting for gold to fall from his mouth. At dawn, the wind rose, and the leaves rustled in the oak. Buratino swayed like a little wooden puppet. The robbers grew bored of sitting on their wet tails. "Hang there, little friend, until evening," they said ominously, and went off to look for a roadside inn. Through the branches of the oak where Buratino hung, the morning dawn spread. The grass on the clearing turned grayish, and the azure flowers were covered with dewdrops. The curly-haired girl with blue hair appeared at the window again, rubbed her eyes, and opened her pretty, sleepy eyes wide. This girl was the most beautiful puppet in Señor Barabbas's puppet theater. Unable to endure the cruel behavior of the theater owner, she had run away from the theater and settled in the secluded house on the grayish clearing. Animals, birds, and even some insects loved her very much, probably because she was well-mannered and gentle. The creatures supplied her with everything she needed. The mole brought nutritious roots. Mice brought sugar, cheese, and pieces of sausage. The noble poodle Artyom brought bread rolls. The magpie stole chocolate candies and silver wrappers from the market for her. Frogs brought lemonade and nutshells. The hawk brought roasted game. May beetles brought various berries. Butterflies brought flower pollen for her to powder herself. Caterpillars produced paste for cleaning teeth and greasing squeaky doors. Swallows eliminated nearby wasps and mosquitoes. Opening her eyes, the blue-haired girl immediately saw Buratino hanging upside down. She pressed her hands to her cheeks and cried, "Ah! Ah! Ah!" Beneath the window, the noble poodle Artyom appeared, flapping his ears. He had just trimmed the back half of his body, as he did every day. The curly hair on the front half was brushed, and the tassel on his tail was tied with a black bow. A silver watch adorned his front paw. "I'm ready." Artyom lifted his nose, curling his upper lip over his white teeth. "Call someone, Artyom," said the girl. "We must take poor Buratino inside and summon the doctor." "Ready!" So ready was Artyom that the raw sand flew from his back paws. He rushed to the anthill, barked to wake all the ants, and sent 400 ants to gnaw through the rope on which Buratino hung. 400 serious ants marched in a line along the narrow path, climbed the oak, and chewed through the rope. Artyom caught Buratino with his front paws as he fell and carried him into the house. Placing him on the bed, the dog galloped to the forest thicket and immediately brought the famous Dr. Owl, the nurse Frog, and the folk healer Mantis, who looked like a dry twig. The owl pressed her ear to Buratino's chest. "The patient is more dead than alive," she whispered, and turned her head back 180 degrees. The frog massaged Buratino with her moist paw for a long time, looking in all directions with her bulging eyes. She clapped her mouth and said, "The patient is more alive than dead." The folk healer Mantis, with dry twig-like hands, began to touch Buratino. "One of two," he whispered. "Either the patient is alive or he is dead. If he is alive, he will stay alive, or he won't. If he is dead, he can be revived, or he can't." "Charlatanry," said the owl, flapping her soft wings, and flew to the dark attic. The frog's warts swelled with anger. "What disgusting ignorance!" she croaked, slapping her belly, hopping into the damp basement. The mantis, just in case, pretended to be a dry twig and fell out the window. The girl flapped her pretty hands. "Well, how do I treat him, citizens?" "With castor oil," croaked the frog from below. "Castor oil," scoffed the owl from the attic. "Either castor oil or not castor oil," rasped the mantis outside the window. Then the ragged, bruised, unfortunate Buratino groaned. "No castor oil. I feel very well." The blue-haired girl bent over him with care. "Buratino, I beg you, pinch your nose, close your eyes, and drink." "I don't want to, don't want to, don't want to." "I'll give you a piece of sugar." Immediately, a white mouse climbed onto the bed with a piece of sugar.
You'll get it if you obey me, said the girl. One seeger, please. Understand, if you don't take the medicine, you could die. I'd rather die than drink castor oil. Then the girl said in a strict, grown-up voice, Pinch your nose and look at the ceiling. 1, 2, 3. She poured the castor oil into Buratino's mouth, immediately gave him the piece of sugar, and kissed him. That's it. The noble Artyom, who loved all things safe and sound, grabbed his tail with his teeth and whirled under the window like a whirlwind of 1,000 paws, 1,000 ears, and 1,000 shining eyes.
The next morning, Buratino woke up cheerful and as healthy as ever. The blue-haired girl was waiting for him in the garden, sitting at a tiny table set with doll-sized dishes. Her face was freshly washed with floral pollen on her upturned nose and cheeks. While waiting for Buratino, she swatted impatiently at the bothersome butterflies. "Oh, do leave me alone." She examined the wooden boy from head to toe, frowned, and told him to sit at the table, pouring a tiny cup of cocoa for him. Buratino sat down, tucking one leg under him. He stuffed almond pastries into his mouth whole, swallowing them without chewing. He plunged his fingers into the jam jar, sucking them clean with pleasure. When the girl turned away to toss a few crumbs to an elderly beetle, he grabbed the coffee pot and drank all the cocoa from its spout, choking and spilling it on the tablecloth. Then the girl said sternly, "Pull your leg out from under you and put it under the table. Don't eat with your hands. That's what spoons and forks are for." She batted her eyelashes in indignation. "Who teaches you, may I ask?" "Sometimes Papa Carlo, sometimes no one," he replied. "Now I will teach you. Rest assured." "Uh-oh," thought Buratino. On the grass around the house, the poodle Artyom chased small birds. When they landed on trees, he lifted his head, jumped, and barked in a whining howl. Great at chasing birds, thought Buratino enviously. Sitting properly at the table gave him goosebumps all over. Finally, the painful breakfast ended. The girl instructed him to wipe the cocoa from his nose. She fixed the folds and bows on her dress, took Buratino by the hand, and led him into the house to continue his education. Meanwhile, the cheerful poodle Artyom dashed across the grass, barking. The birds, unafraid, whistled joyfully, and the breeze danced merrily among the trees. "Take off your rags. You'll get a proper jacket and trousers," said the girl. 4 tailors, the solitary master, the sullen crab, Sheptalo, the gray woodpecker with a crest, the large beetle Rogach, and the mouse Lisetta, sewed a handsome boy's outfit from the girl's old dresses. Sheptalo cut the fabric, Woodpecker poked holes and stitched with his beak, Rogach twisted threads with his hind legs, and Lisetta chewed them through. Buratino felt ashamed to wear the girl's old clothes, but he had no choice. Sniffling, he tucked 4 gold coins into the pocket of his new jacket. "Now sit, hands in front of you, don't slouch," said the girl, taking a piece of chalk. "We'll practice arithmetic. Suppose you have 2 apples in your pocket." Buratino winked slyly. "Liar, none at all." "I'm speaking hypothetically," the girl patiently repeated. "Suppose someone takes 1 apple from you. How many apples remain?" 2, he answered, thinking hard. "Think carefully. 2. Why? I won't give Necht any apple, even if he fights." "You have no talent for mathematics," said the girl in frustration. "Let's do dictation." She lifted her pretty eyes to the ceiling. "Right." And the rose fell on Azor's paw. "Done." Now read this magic phrase backwards. It was already known that Buratino had never even seen a pen or inkwell. The girl said, "Right," and he immediately plunged his nose into the inkwell, terribly frightened when a blot of ink fell onto the paper from his nose. The girl flung up her hands. Tears even sprang to her eyes. "You naughty rascal, you must be punished." She leaned out the window. Artyom, take Buratino to the dark closet. The noble Artyom appeared in the doorway, baring his white teeth. He grabbed Buratino by his jacket and backed him into the closet, where large spiders hung in webs in the corners. He locked him in, growling to give him a good scare, then rushed off after the birds. The girl, throwing herself onto the doll lace bed, wept for having to be so harsh with the wooden boy. But since she had taken on his education, she resolved to see it through. Buratino grumbled in the dark closet. What a silly girl. Now she fancies herself my teacher. And she has a porcelain head, stuffed with cotton. A tiny squeak sounded in the closet, like someone gnashing tiny teeth. Listen, listen. He lifted his ink-stained nose and saw a bat hanging upside down from the ceiling. What do you want? Wait for the night, Buratino. Quiet, quiet, the spiders whispered from the corners. Don't shake our webs, don't scare away our flies. Buratino sat on a broken pot, propping his cheek with his hand. He had been in worse scrapes than this, but the injustice outraged him. Is this how children are educated? This is torment, not education. Don't sit like that, don't eat like that. Maybe the child hasn't even learned the primer yet, and she grabs the inkwell. Meanwhile, the dog runs after birds, and nothing for him. The bat squeaked again. Wait for the night, Buratino. I will lead you to the land of fools, where your friends, the cat and the fox, happiness and fun await. Wait for the night. The girl with blue hair approached the door of the closet. Buratino, my friend, have you finally repented? He was very angry and his mind was elsewhere. I really need to repent? Don't hold your breath. Then you'll have to stay in the closet until morning. The girl sighed bitterly and left. Night fell. The owl laughed from the attic. The frog crawled out from under the floor, slapping its belly in the reflections of the moonlight on the puddles. The girl went to bed in her lace-covered little bed, sobbing quietly as she fell asleep. Artyom, the poodle, buried his nose under his tail, sleeping by her bedroom door. The house clock struck midnight. The bat swooped down from the ceiling. It's time, Buratino, run! It squeaked near his ear. There's a rat hole in the corner of the closet that leads underground. I'll wait for you on the lawn. It flew out of the dormer window. Buratino dashed to the corner of the closet, tangling in the spider webs. The spiders hissed angrily behind him. He crawled through the rat hole underground. The tunnel became narrower and narrower. Buratino barely squeezed through and suddenly flipped upside down as he fell into the tunnel. There he almost stepped into a mousetrap, stepped on the tail of a grass snake that had just drunk milk from a jug in the dining room, and finally shot out onto the lawn through a cat hole. Above the azure flowers, the bat flew silently. Follow me, Buratino, to the land of fools. Bats have no tails, so the bat did not fly straight like birds, but darted up and down on its membranous wings, looking like a tiny imp. Its mouth was always open, so it could catch, bite, and swallow mosquitoes and night moths along the way. Buratino ran after it, with the grass hitting him in the face. Wet puddles splashed over his cheeks. Suddenly, the bat leapt high toward the full round moon and called out to someone, "I've brought him!" Buratino immediately tumbled down the steep cliff, rolling and landing in the burdock leaves. Scratched, his mouth full of sand, eyes wide open, he sat up. Whoa! Before him stood Cat Basilio and Fox Alice. Brave, daring Buratino, you must have fallen from the moon, said the fox. Strange that he survived, the cat said gloomily. Buratino was glad to see his old friends, though he noticed that Cat Basilio had his right paw bandaged, and Fox Alice's tail was smeared with swamp mud. No harm without some good, said the fox. At least you've reached the land of fools. She pointed her paw at a broken bridge over a dry stream. On the other side, among piles of garbage, stood half-collapsed houses, scrawny trees with broken branches, and crooked bell towers leaning in every direction. In this city, they sell the famous rabbit fur jackets for Papa Carlo, the fox sang, licking her lips. Alphabet books with colorful pictures. Oh, the sweet pies and lollipop roosters on sticks. You haven't lost your coins yet, have you, sweet Buratino? Fox Alice helped him to his feet, brushed his jacket, and led him across the broken bridge. Cat Basilio limped sullenly behind. It was already midnight, yet nobody in the City of Fools was asleep. On the crooked, dirty street wandered skinny dogs tangled in burrs, yawning from hunger. Ehehe. Goats with ragged fur nibbled at the dusty grass along the sidewalk, wagging their stubby tails. Be-e-e-da. A cow stood with its head down, bones protruding through its skin. Moo, charing, it repeated pensively. On the mud mounds, plucked sparrows sat. They did not fly away, even if stepped on. Exhausted hens with torn tails staggered about. Meanwhile, at intersections, fierce bulldog policemen in triangular hats and spiked collars stood at attention. They shouted at the hungry and mangy residents, "Move along! Keep to the right! Don't dawdle!" The fox dragged Buratino further along the street. They passed well-fed cats in gold spectacles, strolling arm in arm with female cats in bonnets. The fat fox, governor of the city, strutted proudly, and with him a haughty vixen held a night violet flower in her paw. Fox Alice whispered, "These are the ones who sowed money in the field of wonders. Tonight is the last night to sow. By morning you'll have heaps of money and can buy all sorts of things. Let's hurry." The fox and the cat led Buratino to a vacant lot littered with broken pots, tattered shoes, worn galoshes, and rags. They jabbered over each other. Dig a hole, put in the gold, sprinkle with salt, scoop water from the puddle, pour it well, and don't forget to say crex, fex, pex. Buratino scratched his ink-stained nose. Now, step back a little. Goodness, we don't even want to see where you bury the money, said the fox. Heaven forbid, said the cat. They stepped back a little, hiding behind a pile of garbage. Buratino dug a hole, whispering 3 times, crex, fex, pex. He placed 4 gold coins into it, covered it with soil, sprinkled a pinch of salt from his pocket, and poured a handful of water from a puddle. Then he sat down to wait for the tree to grow. Fox Alice thought Buratino would go to sleep, but he kept sitting on the pile of garbage, patiently stretching out his nose. Then Alice told the cat to keep watch and ran to the nearest police station herself. Inside, in a smoke-filled room at a desk stained with ink, the duty bulldog snored loudly. In her most well-meaning voice, the fox said, "Sir brave duty officer, could you detain a certain homeless little thief? There's terrible danger threatening all the wealthy and respectable citizens of this city." Half asleep, the duty bulldog barked so loudly that a puddle formed beneath Alice in fright. "Thief! Grr!" Alice explained that the dangerous little thief, Buratino, had been spotted on the vacant lot. The bulldog, still growling, made a call. 2 Doberman Pinscher detectives who never slept, trusted no one, and even suspected themselves of crimes, burst into the room. The duty officer ordered them to bring the dangerous criminal to the station, dead or alive. The detectives responded briefly, woof, and raced off to the vacant lot in a clever sideways gallop. For the last 100 steps, they crawled on their bellies and suddenly pounced on Buratino, grabbing him under the arms and dragging him to the station. Buratino kicked his legs, begging, "Why?" "Why?" The detectives replied, "They'll sort it out there." Meanwhile, the fox and the cat quickly dug up the 4 gold coins. Alice divided the money so skillfully that the cat ended up with 1 coin, and she kept 3. The cat silently sank his claws into her face. Alice grabbed him tightly with her paws, and they rolled around on the vacant lot for a while. Fox and cat fur flew in clumps in the moonlight. After scratching each other's sides, they finally split the coins evenly and vanished from the city that very night. Meanwhile, the detectives brought Buratino to the police station. The duty bulldog crawled out from behind the desk and searched his pockets himself. Finding nothing but a piece of sugar and crumbs of a small almond cake, he growled ferociously at Buratino. "You've committed 3 crimes, scoundrel. You are homeless, passportless, and unemployed. Take him out of the city and drown him in the pond." The detectives barked in agreement. "Woof!" Buratino tried to tell them about Papa Carlo and his adventures, all in vain. The detectives grabbed him, galloped out of the city, and threw him from a bridge into a deep, dirty pond, full of frogs, leeches, and water beetle larvae. Buratino splashed into the water and green duckweed closed over him. One mustn't forget that Buratino was made of wood, and therefore he could not drown. Still, he was so frightened that he lay for a long time on the water, completely covered with green duckweed. The pond's inhabitants gathered around him, the well-known, silly, black, chubby tadpoles, water beetles with paddle-like hind legs, leeches, larvae that ate anything in sight, even themselves, and finally, various tiny infusoria. The tadpoles tickled him with their stiff lips and happily chewed on the tassel of his cap. Leeches crawled into the pocket of his jacket. One water beetle climbed onto his nose several times, sticking high out of the water, and then leapt into the water like a swallow. The tiny infusoria, wriggling and trembling rapidly with their hair-like limbs that acted as hands and feet, tried to grab something edible, but they themselves ended up in the mouths of the beetle larvae. Buratino finally grew tired of this and slapped the water with his heels. "Go away. I'm not a dead cat." The pond dwellers scattered in all directions. Buratino turned onto his stomach and swam. On the round lily pads under the moon, big-mouthed frogs sat with their bulging eyes fixed on him. "What a cuttlefish is swimming by," croaked one. "Look at that nose, like a stork's," croaked another. "That's a sea frog," croaked a third. Buratino, needing a rest, climbed onto a large lily pad. Sitting down, he hugged his knees and said, chattering his teeth, "All the boys and girls have drunk milk, are sleeping in warm beds, and I'm the only one sitting on a wet leaf. Give me something to eat, frogs." Frogs, as everyone knows, are cold-blooded, but one shouldn't think they have no hearts. When Buratino, chattering his teeth, began to tell them about his unhappy adventures, the frogs one by one jumped, flicked their hind legs, and dove to the bottom of the pond. They brought from the depths a dead beetle, a dragonfly wing, a piece of silt, a grain of crab roe, and a few rotten roots. Placing all these edible items before Buratino, the frogs jumped back onto the lily pads and sat stone still, heads raised, eyes bulging. Buratino sniffed and tasted the frogs' offerings. "It makes me sick," he said. "What a disgusting mess." The frogs all splashed back into the water at once. The green duckweed on the pond's surface stirred, and a large, frightening snakehead appeared. It swam toward the lily pad where Buratino sat. The tassel on his cap stood on end. He nearly fell into the water from fright, but it wasn't a snake. It was the harmless, elderly turtle Tortilla with slightly cloudy eyes. "You silly, trusting little boy with short thoughts," said Tortilla. "You should be sitting at home studying diligently, and here you are, carried off to the land of fools." "But I wanted to get more gold coins for Papa Carlo." I'm a very good and sensible boy, Buratino protested. Your coins were stolen by the cat and the fox, said the turtle. They ran past the pond to get a drink, and I heard them boasting that they dug up your money and even fought over it. Oh, you silly, trusting little fool with short thoughts. You shouldn't scold, Buratino grumbled. You should help people. What will I do now? Oh, how will I get back to Papa Carlo? I. He rubbed his eyes with his fists and whimpered so pitifully that the frogs suddenly all sighed. Ooh. Tortilla, help the boy. The turtle gazed at the moon for a long time, recalling something. Once I helped a man just like this, and he later made turtle combs for my grandmother and grandfather, she said. I'm going to crawl along the bottom now. Maybe I'll find something useful. She drew in her serpentine head and slowly submerged. The frogs whispered, Tortilla, the turtle knows a great secret. A long time passed. The moon was already sinking behind the hills. The green duckweed stirred again, and Tortilla reappeared, holding a small golden key in her mouth. She placed it on the lily pad at Buratino's feet. You silly, trusting little fool with short thoughts, said Tortilla. Don't be upset that the fox and the cat stole your coins. I give you this little key. A bearded man dropped it to the bottom of the pond. His beard was so long he tucked it into his pocket so it wouldn't get in the way. Oh, how he begged me to find this key. Tortilla sighed, paused, and sighed again, bubbles rising from the water. But I didn't help him then. I was very angry with humans for what they did to my grandmother and grandfather, turning them into turtle combs. The bearded man told me a lot about this key, but I forgot most of it. I only remember that it opens some door, and it will bring happiness. Buratino's heart began to beat. His eyes lit up. He immediately forgot all his misfortunes. He took the leeches out of his jacket pocket, placed the key there, politely thanked Tortilla and the frogs, jumped into the water, and swam toward the shore. When he appeared as a small black shadow at the edge of the bank, the frogs called after him, Buratino, don't lose the key. Tortilla. The turtle hadn't given directions out of the land of fools. Buratino ran wherever his eyes could see. Behind the black trees, stars gleamed. Rocks hung over the road. In the ravine lay a cloud of mist. Suddenly, a gray little bundle jumped ahead. Immediately, a dog bark sounded. Buratino pressed himself against a rock. Past him rushed two fierce bulldog policemen from the land of fools, snorting furiously. The gray bundle darted off the road to the embankment. The bulldogs followed it. When the pounding and barking had died away in the distance, Buratino ran so fast that the stars seemed to race behind the black branches. Suddenly, the gray bundle jumped across the road again. Buratino saw that it was a hare, and on its back sat a pale little man holding onto the hare's ears. Pebbles tumbled from the embankment. The bulldogs leapt after the hare, and again all grew quiet. Buratino ran so fast that the stars now dashed madly behind the black branches. The gray hare jumped across the road a third time. The little man hit his head on a branch, fell off the hare's back, and landed right at Buratino's feet. "Rrrr, Gaff! Catch him!" The bulldogs called after the hare. Their eyes were so filled with rage that they didn't notice Buratino or the pale little man. "Goodbye, Malvina! Goodbye forever!" the little man squeaked in a plaintive voice. Buratino leaned over him, and to his surprise, saw that it was Pierrot, in a long-sleeved white shirt. He lay head down in the wheel rut, evidently thinking himself already dead, squeaking the mysterious phrase, "Goodbye, Malvina, goodbye forever," as if taking leave of life. Buratino began shaking him, tugging his leg, but Pierrot didn't move. Then Buratino found a leech that had tumbled into his pocket and placed it on the nose of the apparently lifeless little man. The leech, without hesitation, bit his nose. Pierrot sat up quickly, shook his head, removed the leech, and groaned. "Ah, I'm still alive, it turns out." Buratino grabbed his cheeks, white as tooth powder, kissed him, and asked, "How did you get here? Why were you riding on a gray hare?" "Buratino, Buratino," Pierrot answered, nervously glancing around. "Hide me quickly. The dogs were not chasing the gray hare. They were chasing me. Signor Carabas Barabas pursues me day and night. He hired the city's police dogs and swore to catch me, alive or dead." In the distance, the dogs barked again. Buratino grabbed Pierrot by the sleeve and dragged him into the mimosa thickets, covered with flowers shaped like round, yellow, fragrant bumps. There, lying on the decayed leaves, Pierrot whispered to him, "Do you understand, Buratino? One night the wind howled, and it rained like buckets." "Do you understand, Buratino? One night the wind howled, and it rained like buckets." Signor Carabas Barabas sat by the hearth, smoking his pipe. All the puppets were already asleep. I was the only one awake. I thought of the girl with the blue hair. "You sure picked someone to think about, you fool," Buratino interrupted. "Last night I ran away from that girl from the spider-filled cupboard." "What? You saw the girl with blue hair? You saw my Malvina?" "It's no big deal, a crybaby and a pest." Pierrot jumped up, waving his arms. "Take me to her. If you help me find Malvina, I'll tell you the secret of the golden key." "What?" Buratino shouted joyfully. "You know the secret of the golden key?" "I know where the key lies, how to get it, and that it must open a certain little door. I overheard the secret, and that's why Signor Carabas Barabas is hunting me with police dogs." Buratino wanted badly to boast that the mysterious key was already in his pocket. To avoid slipping, he pulled his cap off his head and stuffed it into his mouth. Pierrot begged to be taken to Malvina. Buratino used his fingers to explain to the fool that it was dark and dangerous now, but at dawn they would run to the girl. Making Pierrot hide again under the mimosa bushes, Buratino spoke in a woolly voice, his mouth full of cap. "Shashkajive." "Tell your story." "So then," Pierrot began, "one night I couldn't sleep, and suddenly someone knocked loudly at the window. Signor Carabas Barabas grumbled, 'Who is out in this dog weather?' 'It's me, Duramar,' came the voice at the window, 'a seller of medicinal leeches. Allow me to warm myself by the fire.' I was very curious about what leech sellers were like. I quietly pulled back the corner of the curtain and peeked into the room. And I saw Signor Carabas Barabas stood up from his chair, stepped on his beard as usual, cursed, and opened the door. A long, soaking wet man entered, with a tiny wrinkled face like a morel mushroom. He wore an old green coat. Pliers, hooks, and pins dangled from his belt. In his hands he held a tin can and a net. "If your stomach hurts," he said, bowing as if his back were broken in the middle, "if you have a terrible headache or ringing in your ears, I can attach half a dozen excellent leeches to your ears." Signor Carabas Barabas grumbled, "To the devil with leeches. Dry yourself by the fire as long as you like." Duramar turned his back to the hearth. Steam rose from his green coat, and it smelled of mud. "Business is bad," he said again. "For a piece of cold pork and a glass of wine, I'm ready to attach a dozen fine leeches to your thighs if your bones ache." "To the devil with leeches!" shouted Carabas Barabas. "Eat pork and drink wine." Duramar ate the pork, his face stretching and twisting like rubber. After eating and drinking, he asked for a pinch of tobacco. "Signor, I am fed and warm," he said. "To repay your hospitality, I will tell you a secret." Carabas Barabas puffed his pipe and replied, "There is only one secret in the world I want to know. I couldn't care less about anything else." "Signor," said Duramar, "I know a great secret, which was told to me by the turtle Tortilla." At these words, Barabbas's eyes widened. He jumped up, got tangled in his beard, lunged at the frightened Duramar, pressed him to his belly, and bellowed like a bull, "Dearest Duramar, most precious Duramar, speak quickly. What did Tortilla the turtle tell you?" Then Duramar told him the following story. "I was catching leeches in a dirty pond near the land of fools. For 4 soldi a day, I hired a poor man. He would strip and wade in the pond up to his neck, standing until the leeches latched onto his bare body. Then he would come out to the shore. I would collect the leeches and send him back in the pond. When we had gathered enough, suddenly a snake's head appeared from the water. 'Listen, Duramar,' said the head. 'You've frightened all the inhabitants of our beautiful pond. You're muddying the water. You won't let me rest. After breakfast. When will this chaos end?' I saw it was an ordinary turtle, and not afraid at all, I replied, 'Until I catch all the leeches in your dirty pond. I am willing to bribe you, Duramar, so you leave our pond alone and never come back.' Then I started teasing the turtle. 'Ah, you old floating trunk, silly Tortilla, what can you offer me? Your bony shell where you hide your head and legs. I could sell your shell for combs.' The turtle turned green with anger and said to me, 'At the bottom of the pond lies a magic key. I know a man, he would do anything to get this key.' Before Duramar could finish, Barabbas shouted at the top of his lungs, 'That man is me, dearest Duramar. Then why didn't you take the key from the turtle?' 'Oh, please,' answered Duramar, his face wrinkling like a boiled morel mushroom, 'to trade the finest leeches for some key.' In short, we quarreled, and the turtle, raising her paw from the water, said, 'I swear, neither you nor anyone else shall get the magic key. I swear, it shall go only to the person who makes all the pond's inhabitants beg me for it.' With her paw raised, the turtle sank back into the water. 'Don't waste a second. Run to the land of fools,' shouted Barabbas, hurriedly stuffing the end of his beard into his pocket, grabbing his hat and lantern. 'I will sit on the shore of the pond. I will smile pitifully. I will beg the frogs, tadpoles, and water beetles to plead with the turtle. I promise them 1.5 million of the fattest flies. I will cry like a lonely cow, moan like a sick chicken, weep like a crocodile. I will kneel before the tiniest frog. The key must be mine. I will go to the city, enter a house, creep into the room under the stairs. I will find the little door. Everyone passes by it, and no one notices. I will insert the key into the keyhole. At that moment you see Buratino,' Piero said, sitting under the mimosa on the decayed leaves. I became so curious that I leaned out from behind the curtain. Signor Barabbas saw me. 'You're eavesdropping, scoundrel!' He lunged to catch me and throw me into the fire, but got tangled in his beard and crashed into the floor with a terrible ruckus, overturning chairs. I don't remember how I got outside the window, how I climbed over the fence. It was dark, the wind roared, and the rain lashed. Over my head, a black cloud lit up with lightning, and 10 steps behind, I saw Barabbas and the leech seller running. I thought, I'm lost, stumbled, fell onto something soft and warm, and grabbed someone's ears. It was a gray hare. He squeaked in fear, jumped high, but I held him tightly by the ears, and we raced through the fields, vineyards, and gardens in the dark. When the hare grew tired and sat down, sulking with his split lip, I kissed his forehead. 'Just a little more, come on, gray one.' The hare sighed, and again we dashed off, now to the right, now to the left. When the clouds parted and the moon rose, I saw a little town under the hill, with crooked bell towers leaning every which way. Along the road to the town, ran Carabas, Barabbas, and the leech seller. The hare said, "Eh, hey, hey, here it is, rabbit happiness. They're going to the land of fools to hire police dogs. We're doomed." The hare hung his head, pressed his nose into his paws, and drooped his ears. I begged, I cried, I even bowed to him. The hare did not move. But when two snub-nosed bulldogs with black bands on their right paws galloped out of the city, the hare shivered all over. I barely managed to jump on his back, and he bolted desperately through the forest. The rest you saw yourself, Buratino. Piero finished his story, and Buratino asked cautiously, "And in which house, in which room under the stairs, is the little door that the key opens?" Carabas Barabbas didn't have time to tell. It doesn't matter. The key is at the bottom of the pond. We will never see happiness." "Did you see this?" Buratino shouted in his ear. Pulling the key from his pocket, he twirled it before Piero's nose. "Here it is!" When the sun rose over the rocky mountain peak, Buratino and Piero crawled out from under the bush and ran across the field, the same one from which the bat had carried Buratino from the blue-haired girl's house to the land of fools the previous night. Piero was funny to watch. He hurried so eagerly to see Malvina. "Listen," he asked every 15 seconds. "Buratino, will she be happy to see me?" "How should I know?" 15 seconds later, "Listen, Buratino, what if she's not happy?" "How should I know?" Finally, they saw a little white house, its shutters painted with the sun, moon, and stars. Smoke rose from the chimney. Above it floated a small cloud shaped like a cat's head. The poodle Artemon sat on the porch, occasionally growling at the cloud. Buratino wasn't very eager to return to the blue-haired girl, but he was hungry and could already smell the scent of boiled milk from afar. "If the girl decides to scold us again, we'll just drink the milk. I won't stay here for nothing," he thought. At that moment, Malvina came out of the house. In one hand, she held a porcelain coffee pot, in the other a basket of cookies. Her eyes were still red from crying. She was certain the rats had dragged Buratino from the cupboard and eaten him. As soon as she sat at the doll-sized table on the sandy path, the azure flowers trembled. Butterflies lifted above them like white and yellow leaves, and Buratino and Piero appeared. Malvina opened her eyes so wide that both wooden boys could easily have jumped inside. Upon seeing Malvina, Piero began to mumble words so incoherent and foolish that we won't repeat them here. Buratino said casually, "Here I brought him. Teach him your lessons." Malvina finally realized this wasn't a dream. "Oh, what happiness," she whispered, then immediately added in a grown-up voice, "Boys, go wash up and brush your teeth immediately. Artemon, take the boys to the well." "You see," grumbled Buratino, "she has a mania. Wash up, brush teeth." She would drive anyone out of the world with cleanliness. Still, they washed. Artemon brushed their coats with the brush at the end of his tail. They sat at the table. Buratino stuffed his cheeks with food. Piero didn't even take a bite. He stared at Malvina as if she were made of almond paste. Eventually she grew tired of this. "Well," she said to him, "what do you see on my face? Please have your breakfast calmly." "Malvina," Piero replied, "I haven't eaten for a long time. I am composing poetry." Buratino shook with laughter. Malvina was surprised and widened her eyes again. "In that case, read your poems," she said, propping her cheek with a pretty hand and lifting her bright eyes to the cloud shaped like a cat's head. Piero began to recite his poems in such a wailing voice that it seemed as if he were at the bottom of a deep well. "Malvina ran to foreign lands. Malvina disappeared, my bride. I weep. I do not know where to go. Is it better to part with the puppet life?" Before Piero could finish, and before Malvina could praise the poems she liked so much, a frog appeared on the sandy path. With her eyes bulging in fear, she said, "Last night, the turtle tortilla revealed everything about the golden key to Carabas Barabas." Malvina screamed in fright, though she understood nothing. Pierrot, distracted as all poets are, uttered some incoherent exclamations, which we won't recount here. But Buratino immediately jumped up and began stuffing cookies, sugar, and candies into his pockets. "Run as fast as possible. If the police dogs bring Carabas Barabas here, we're done for." Malvina turned pale, like the wing of a white butterfly. Pierrot, thinking she was dying, overturned the coffee pot on her, and Malvina's pretty dress was drenched in cocoa. Artemon, barking loudly, and who had to wash Malvina's dresses, grabbed Pierrot by the collar and shook him until he stammered, "Enough, please." The frog, staring at the commotion with her bulging eyes, said again, "Carabas Barabas with the police dogs will be here in 15 minutes. Malvina ran to change. Pierrot desperately wrung his hands and even tried to throw himself back onto the sandy path. Artemon dragged bundles of household items, doors slammed, sparrows chattered frantically in the bush, swallows flew close to the ground. An owl laughed wildly from the attic to increase the panic. Only Buratino remained calm. He loaded 2 bundles with the most necessary items onto Artemon. Malvina, dressed in a pretty travel dress, was seated on the bundles. Pierrot was told to hold onto the dog's tail. Buratino ran ahead. "No panic! Let's go!" Buratino, bravely leading the dog, Malvina bouncing on the bundles, and behind them Pierrot, stuffed with foolish verses instead of common sense, emerged from the tall grass onto the smooth field. The disheveled beard of Carabas Barabas appeared from the forest. He shielded his eyes with his palm from the sun and scanned the surroundings. Senor Carabas was holding 2 police dogs on leashes. Seeing the fugitives across the flat field, he bared his toothy mouth. "Aha!" he shouted and let the dogs loose. The fierce dogs first kicked up dirt with their hind legs. They didn't even growl. They didn't even look at the fugitives. They were simply proud of their strength. Then the dogs slowly approached the place where Buratino, Artemon, Pierrot, and Malvina had stopped in horror. It seemed all was lost. Carabas Barabas lumbered after the police dogs, his beard constantly slipping out of his coat pocket and tangling around his feet. Artemon tucked his tail and growled fiercely. Malvina shook her hands. I'm scared! I'm scared!" Pierrot lowered his sleeves and looked at Malvina, convinced that all was over. Buratino was the first to recover. "Pierrot," he shouted, "grab the girl's hand. Run to the lake, where the swans are." "Artemon, drop the bundles. Take off your watch. You'll fight." Malvina, hearing this brave command, jumped off Artemon and, picking up her dress, ran to the lake. Pierrot followed her. Artemon dropped the bundles, removed his watch and bow from the tip of his tail, bared his teeth, jumped left, jumped right, flexed his muscles, and started kicking up the earth with his hind legs. Buratino climbed the resinous trunk to the top of an Italian pine standing alone in the field, and from there yelled, howled, and squeaked at the top of his voice. "Animals, birds, insects, they are beating us. Save the innocent wooden people." The police bulldog seemed to notice Artemon only now and lunged at him. The clever poodle dodged, biting one dog on the tail stub, the other on the hind leg. The bulldogs clumsily turned and lunged at the poodle again. He jumped high, letting them pass beneath him, and managed to scratch one on the side, the other on the back. The bulldogs attacked a 3rd time. Artemon lowered his tail to the ground and ran circles around the field, sometimes letting the police dogs get close, sometimes dashing away right under their noses. The snub-nosed bulldogs were now truly enraged, snorting and running behind Artemon stubbornly, ready to die rather than fail to reach the busy poodle's throat. Meanwhile, Carabas Barabas approached the Italian pine, grabbed the trunk, and began to shake it. "Get down! Get down!" Buratino clung with hands, feet, and teeth to a branch. Carabas Barabas shook the tree so violently that all the cones on its branches swayed. The cones of the Italian pine are spiky and heavy, about the size of a small melon. Getting hit on the head with one, ouch! Buratino barely held on to the swinging branch. He saw that Artemon's tongue, now a red rag, was sticking out as he ran slower and slower. "Give me the key!" roared Carabas Barabas, baring his mouth. Buratino crawled along the branch, reached a big cone, and began to gnaw at the stem holding it. Carabas Barabas shook harder, and the heavy cone flew down, bang, right into his toothy mouth. Carabas Barabas even squatted. Buratino tore off a second cone, and it, bang, hit Carabas Barabas squarely on the crown of his head, like a drum. "They're hitting us!" Buratino yelled again. "Help the innocent wooden people!" The first to help were swifts. They swooped in front of the bulldogs at breakneck speed. The dogs snapped their jaws in vain. A swift is no ordinary fly, like a gray lightning bolt zipping past the nose. From the cloud shaped like a cat's head, a black kite fell. The one who usually brought game to Malvina. It sank its claws into a police dog's back, lifted the dog on magnificent wings, and dropped it. The dog shrieked and flailed its paws upward. Artemon charged another dog from the side, struck it with his chest, knocked it down, bit it, and leapt away. Once again, Artemon and the bitten, battered police dogs raced around the lone pine. Helping Artemon came frogs. They dragged along two old blind snakes. The snakes didn't care. They had to die either under a rotten stump or in the stomach of a heron. The frogs persuaded them to die heroically. The noble Artemon now decided to engage in open combat. He sat on his tail, bared his fangs. The bulldogs lunged at him, and all three rolled together in a tangle. Artemon snapped his jaws and scratched. The bulldogs, ignoring the bites and scratches, waited for one thing: to reach Artemon's throat with a death grip. Screams and howls filled the field. Helping Artemon came a family of hedgehogs. Father, mother, mother-in-law, two unmarried aunts, and little hedgehogs. Fat black velvet bees in golden cloaks buzzed furiously. Fierce hornets hissed, wings slicing the sunlight, while beetles and long-antlered biting insects scuttled across the ground. All around, birds, frogs, and insects threw themselves at the hated police dogs with devotion. The hedgehogs, rolling into balls, shot across the field like croquet balls, jabbing the bulldogs' faces with their spines. Bees and hornets plunged their poison stingers into the dogs, while ants crawled into nostrils, releasing venom. Beetles bit at the dogs' bellies. A black kite pecked one dog, then the other. Butterflies and flies swarmed, blocking their vision. Frogs held two old blind snakes, ready to die heroically. When one bulldog opened his mouth to spit ant venom, the blind snake lunged in headfirst, spiraling down the throat. The second snake did the same. Both dogs, pierced and battered, rolled helplessly. Artemon emerged victorious. Carabas Barabas pulled the spiky pine cone from his mouth, eyes bulging. Staggering, he clutched the Italian pine trunk. The wind lifted the end of his beard, which stuck to the resin. Buratino, perched on a branch, squeaked teasingly, "Uncle, you can't catch me!" He leapt to the ground and ran around the tree. Carabas Barabas chased, fingers stretching in vain. His beard wrapped around the trunk and stuck tight, leaving him nose first against the tree. Buratino dashed toward Swan Lake to find Malvina and Pierrot. The battered Artemon limped behind on three legs, tucking the fourth. On the field lay the two ruined police dogs and the helpless, bewildered Carabas Barabas, stuck fast to the Italian pine by his own beard. Malvina and Piero sat on a damp, warm mound among the reeds. Above them hung a cobweb net, littered with dragonfly wings and the husks of sucked dry mosquitoes. Tiny blue birds, hopping from reed to reed, gazed with cheerful surprise at the little girl who wept so bitterly. From afar came desperate cries and barking, the sound of Artemon and Buratino, who were clearly selling their lives dearly. "I'm afraid. I'm so afraid," Malvina whispered again and again, covering her wet face with a torn burdock leaf. Piero, in his hopeless way, tried to comfort her with poetry. "We sit upon this clover mound, where golden flowers bloom around, fragrant, gentle, sweet and fair. Summer days will linger there." Malvina stamped her little feet. You tire me, boy. Fetch a fresh leaf. Can't you see this one is soaked and full of holes?" Suddenly the noise and barking from afar went silent. Malvina slowly raised her hands. "Artemon and Buratino, they are lost," she whispered, and fell face first onto the mossy mound. Piero stumbled about helplessly near her. The wind sighed softly through the tops of the reeds. And then, footsteps. Surely it was Carabas Barabas, come to seize them in his huge hands and stuff them into his bottomless pockets. But the reeds parted, and there stood Buratino, nose up, mouth wide with a grin. Behind him limped poor Artemon, scratched and ragged, yet bravely carrying two bundles. "They thought they could fight me," Buratino declared, paying no attention to the joy of Malvina and Piero. Cats, foxes, police dogs, even Carabas Barabas himself. "Pa, girl, climb on the dog. Boy, hold the tail. Let's go." And with proud steps he marched along the tussocks, elbows pushing aside the reeds, leading them round the lake to the far shore. Neither Malvina nor Piero dared to ask how the battle had ended, or why Carabas Barabas did not follow. At last, they reached the other side. Noble Artemon began to whimper and limp on every paw. A halt was needed to tend his wounds. Beneath the vast roots of a pine tree, growing on a stony hill, they found a cave. Inside, they carried the bundles, and there too crawled Artemon. The brave dog licked each paw, then stretched it toward Malvina. Buratino tore strips from Malvina's old blouse for bandages. Piero held them. Malvina bound his wounds. When all was done, Artemon was given a thermometer, then peacefully fell asleep. "Piero," said Buratino, "roll down to the lake and bring water." Obediently, Piero shuffled off, mumbling verses, stumbling, and along the way losing the lid. He returned with only a few drops left in the kettle. "Malvina," Buratino ordered, "fly and fetch some branches for a fire." Malvina glanced at him with reproach, lifted her small shoulders, and brought back only a few dry stalks. Buratino sighed. "Punishment, that's what it is, to travel with the well-bred." So he fetched the water himself, gathered branches and pine cones, kindled a roaring fire at the cave's mouth, so strong that the tall pine above them shook its branches. He even brewed cocoa in plain water. "Quickly now, sit down and eat." Malvina had stayed silent all this while, lips pressed tight, but now she spoke firmly, in her most grown-up voice. "Do not think, Buratino, that because you fought the dogs and saved us from Carabas Barabas and behaved bravely, that you are excused from washing your hands and brushing your teeth before breakfast." Buratino nearly fell over, staring wide-eyed at this iron-willed little girl. Malvina stepped out of the cave and clapped her hands. "Butterflies, caterpillars, beetles, frogs, come." Within a minute, great butterflies, dusted with flower pollen, fluttered inside. Caterpillars crawled in, along with solemn dung beetles, and plump frogs hopped in on their bellies. Butterflies, sighing with their wings, settled on the walls to make the cave beautiful and to keep falling earth from the food. The beetles rolled the dirt on the floor into neat little balls and pushed them outside. A fat white caterpillar climbed onto Buratino's head, dangled down his nose, and squeezed out a bit of paste onto his teeth. Like it or not, he had to brush. Another did the same for Pierrot. Then a sleepy badger waddled in, looking like a furry piglet. He scooped up brown caterpillars, pressed paste onto the shoes, and polished all 3 pairs with his tail, Malvina's, Buratino's, and Pierrot's. Then he yawned deeply, ah ha ha ha, and lumbered away. Next flew in a restless, colorful hoopoe, its red crest rising straight up whenever it was surprised. Who needs a combing? Me, said Malvina. Curl and comb me, I am quite disheveled. But where is the mirror, darling? Asked the bird. The frogs croaked. We will bring one. 10 frogs hopped to the lake and returned with a mirror carp, so fat and sleepy it did not care where it was dragged. They propped the fish upright before Malvina, pouring water from the kettle into its mouth so it would not suffocate. The hoopoe curled and combed Malvina's hair, then gently lifted one of the butterflies and dabbed it upon her nose, leaving it powdered. All done, darling, he cried, and off he whirled out of the cave. The frogs dragged the carp back into the lake. Buratino and Pierrot, like it or not, washed their hands and even their necks. At last, Malvina allowed them to sit and eat. After breakfast, brushing crumbs from her dress, she said, Buratino, my friend, last time we stopped at dictation. Let us continue the lesson. Buratino longed to run out of the cave, anywhere his legs might carry him. But how could he leave behind helpless friends and a wounded dog? He grumbled, We did not bring writing things. Not true, we did, groaned Artemon. He dragged himself to the bundle, untied it with his teeth, and pulled out ink, a pen case, a notebook, even a tiny globe. Do not grip the pen too tightly, or you will stain your fingers, said Malvina, lifting her bright eyes to the butterflies on the cave roof when a sudden crunch of branches, coarse voices. Passing right outside were Duramar, the seller of leeches, and the limping Carabas Barabbas. On the director's forehead swelled a monstrous lump, his nose puffed, his beard torn and smeared with resin. Groaning and spitting, he muttered, They cannot have gone far. They must be here, somewhere in the forest. Carabas Barabbas and Duramar crept slowly past the cave. During the battle on the plain, the seller of leeches had hidden trembling behind a bush. When all was over, and Artemon with Buratino had vanished into the tall grass, only then did he crawl out, and with great difficulty, peel Carabas Barabbas's beard from the sticky trunk of an Italian pine. Well, that boy gave you quite a thrashing, Duramar remarked slyly. I'd advise 24 of my finest leeches upon your lump, sir. Carabas roared like thunder. By 100,000 devils, after them, at once. Together they set off, forcing their way through the grass, peering under every bush, poking every hummock. They even saw the smoke curling from the fire beneath the old pine tree's roots. Yet it never entered their thick heads that fugitives might be hiding inside a cave, bold enough to light a fire. I'll slice that wretched Buratino into pieces with my pocket knife, growled Carabas, shaking his fists. Meanwhile, in the cave, the runaways huddled in silence. Should they flee? But poor Artemon, wrapped in bandages, slept soundly. He would need a full day's rest for his wounds to heal. Could they abandon their noble friend? No, no. If they must escape, then together. If they must perish, then together. In the cave's dark corner, Buratino, Malvina, and Pierrot pressed their noses close and held a council. At last they agreed to wait until morning, to hide the entrance with branches, and meanwhile nurse Artemon's strength. But Buratino declared, One thing I must know, where is the little door that the golden key unlocks? Behind it lies something marvelous, something wondrous, and it is meant to bring us happiness. I am afraid to stay here without you, Malvina whispered. And what of Pierrot? Buratino asked. He only reads poetry. She sighed. I shall guard Malvina like a lion, Pierrot croaked, trying to make his voice deep and wild like a beast's growl. You don't yet know me. Well said, Pierrot. At last, some courage. Buratino grinned and then darted off, following the trail of Carabas and Duramar. It did not take long to find them. Carabas sat sulking by a brook, while Duramar pressed a poultice of sorrel leaves against his swollen lump. From afar, Buratino could hear Carabas's empty stomach rumbling like distant thunder, and Duramar's whining belly squeaking like a hungry mouse. My lord, we must refresh ourselves, Duramar urged. The hunt for these villains may last until deep night. I could devour a whole piglet and perhaps a pair of fat ducks as well, groaned Carabas. Together they trudged toward the tavern, called the Three Gudgeons, whose signboard swayed on a hilltop. But Buratino, crouching low in the grass, ran even faster to reach it first. Near the doorway strutted a proud rooster, scratching the ground, shaking his crimson comb, calling his hens with every discovery of a grain or scrap. Cluck, 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 he cried importantly. Buratino held out a few crumbs of almond cake on his wooden palm. Good sir generalissimo, will you honor yourself with a treat? The rooster fixed the boy with a stern eye, but could not resist. He pecked at the sweet crumbs and crowed, Cluck, cluck! General, I must slip into the tavern without the host seeing me. If I may hide behind your magnificent tail, you could march me straight to the hearth. Agreed? Cluck, cluck, the rooster cried even more proudly. He had understood nothing at all, yet wished to appear wise. With grand steps, he strode toward the open door. Buratino crouched low, clutching the rooster's sides beneath his wings, covering himself with the bird's splendid tail feathers, and so crept unnoticed straight into the kitchen. There, the bald innkeeper bustled, spinning spits and pans over the fire. Out with you, old soup bones, the man shouted, and gave the rooster such a kick that it flew squawking out the door, scattering terrified hens in all directions. But Buratino slipped past the innkeeper's legs unseen and crouched behind a great clay jug. Just then came the heavy voices of Carabas and Duramar. The innkeeper bowed low and hurried to greet them. Buratino, quick as a cricket, clambered into the jug and hid inside. Carabas, Barabas, and Duramar feasted greedily on a roasted piglet, while the innkeeper poured them wine. Gnawing a pork leg, Carabas growled, Your wine is vile. Pour me instead from that jug, and he pointed with the bone toward the very jug where Buratino was hiding. But, Signor, that jug is empty, said the host nervously. Lies. Show me. The innkeeper lifted the jug and turned it upside down. Buratino braced his elbows hard against the clay sides so as not to tumble out. There's something dark in there, croaked Carabas. Something pale as well, added Duramar, squinting. May I choke on a boil if I lie? The jug is empty, swore the innkeeper. Then place it on the table. We shall throw our bones in it, ordered Carabas. And so the jug was set right between the puppet master and the leech seller. Onto Buratino's wooden head rained greasy bones and crusts. Carabas, drunk with wine, stretched his beard toward the fire so the tar clumps would drip away. I'll place Buratino on one hand, he boasted, and smash him flat with the other. Nothing left but a wet spot. The rascal deserves no less, nodded Duramar. Though I'd first let my leeches suck him dry. No, thundered Carabas, pounding the table. First I'll take the golden key. At that moment the innkeeper, who already knew of the runaway puppets, leaned close and whispered, Why trouble yourself, Signor? I'll summon 2 clever helpers. While you enjoy your wine, they'll scour the woods and drag Buratino here. Fine. Send them, Carabas grunted, sprawling with his enormous boots to the fire. Already drunk, he lifted his head and bellowed, My little wooden rabble, foolish, weak, and fragile, I am your great master, Kukolny despot faster. Fear my 7-tailed whip, fear its crack and grip, Sing, my silly dolls, bring me gold that falls into my pocket deep, into my pocket deep. His booming song shook the rafters. Then, from inside the jug, a hollow, wailing voice arose. Reveal the secret, miserable man. Reveal the secret. Carabas snapped his jaws in terror and bulged his eyes at Duramar. Was that you? No, not I, Duramar squeaked. Then who spoke? Again, the ghostly voice moaned from the jug. Reveal the secret, or you shall never rise from that chair. Carabas tried to leap up, but his body felt heavy as stone. What secret? He stammered. The secret of the turtle tortilla, whispered the voice. Duramar, pale as a moldy mushroom, crawled beneath the table. Carabas clattered his teeth in fright. Where is the door? Where is the door? The voice howled like autumn wind in a chimney. I'll answer! I'll answer! Just hush, whimpered Carabas. The door is in old Carlo's room, behind the painted fireplace. At that very instant, the innkeeper returned, leading 2 trustworthy helpers. And there, bowing politely on the threshold, stood Fox Alice and Cat Basilio. Signor Carabas, purred Alice, removing her shabby hat. Grant us 10 gold coins, and we shall deliver Buratino into your very hands without leaving this spot. Carabas fumbled in his vest pocket, pulled out 10 golden coins, and dropped them onto the table. Here. Now where is he? Alice counted the money twice, sighed, and handed half to Basilio. Then with her paw she pointed. He sits in that jug, signor, right under your nose. With a roar, Carabas seized the jug and smashed it against the stone floor. From the shards and bones sprang Buratino. Before anyone could close their gaping mouths, the wooden boy shot out of the tavern like an arrow, straight toward the proud rooster, who was turning over a dead worm in the yard. You betrayed me, you feathered drumstick! Buratino barked, nose stretched fiercely. Now run as if your life depends on it. He clung tightly to the rooster's grand tail. Startled, the bird flapped its wings and dashed across the yard on its stilt-like legs. Buratino, whirling behind him, sped down the hill, across the road, over the field, and into the woods. Carabas, Duramar, and the innkeeper finally stumbled outside, but too late. In the distance, they saw only the foolish rooster racing madly over the meadow, and since everyone knew the rooster was an idiot, no one suspected he carried Buratino himself. The foolish rooster grew weary, running with his beak wide open. At last, Buratino let go of his ruffled tail. Go back to your hens, General, he muttered. And alone he made his way toward the Swan Lake, glittering brightly through the trees. There was the pine on the rocky hill, there the cave. Broken branches lay about, the grass was trampled by cartwheels. Buratino's heart pounded. He leapt down the hill and peered beneath the roots. The cave was empty, no Malvina, no Piero, no Artemon. Only 2 scraps of cloth lay on the ground. He lifted them, torn sleeves from Piero's white shirt. His friends had been taken, perhaps even killed. Buratino fell flat on the earth, his long nose buried in the soil. Only now did he truly understand how dear they were to him. Malvina with her lessons, Piero with his endless poems, he would give even the golden key just to see them again. Beside his head, the earth stirred. Up popped a velvet mole with pink little paws. He sneezed 3 times and squeaked, I may be blind, but I hear everything. A cart drawn by sheep stopped here. Inside sat the fox, governor of Foolstown, and his henchmen. He ordered, Seize the rascals who dared beat my policeman. Seize them. The bloodhounds barked, Woof! They rushed into the cave, tied up your friends, tossed them in the cart, and drove away. What use was lying there, nose in the dirt? Buratino sprang up and ran after the tracks. He circled the lake, crossed a meadow thick with grass, and walked on and on with no plan but one thought. I must save them. At last he reached the cliff where nights ago he had tumbled into burdock leaves. Below lay a muddy pond, the home of the wise turtle Tortilla. And down the road came the very cart, dragged by 2 half-starved sheep. On the seat sat a fat cat in golden spectacles, cheeks puffed like a bellows. Behind him, Governor Fox himself. Among the bundles lay Malvina, Pierrot, and poor Artemon, bandaged from nose to tail, his once proud plume now trailing sadly in the dust. 2 Doberman hounds marched at the rear. Suddenly the hounds raised their muzzles and spotted Buratino's white cap atop the cliff. In great leaps they bounded upward. Buratino had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, so he clasped his hands above his head like a diver and hurled himself down straight toward the pond. He traced an arc through the air and would have landed safely under Tortilla's protection, had not a sudden gust of wind swept him aside. The wooden boy spun like a corkscrew, whirled, and came crashing down, right into the cart, squarely upon the governor's head. The fat cat toppled from his seat and, being a coward, pretended to faint. The fox squealed and scuttled up the slope, then, in panic, dived into a badger's burrow, where the badgers taught him a lesson he would not soon forget. The frightened sheep bolted, the cart overturned, and Malvina, Pierrot, and Artemon rolled into the burdock leaves. It all happened so quickly, dear listeners, that you could not have counted the fingers on your hand before it was over. The Dobermans bounded down the cliff, saw the cat sprawled in a faint, the puppets in the weeds, the bandaged poodle, and no governor. Their master had vanished, as though the earth had swallowed him. One hound lifted its muzzle and howled in despair. The other followed. Ah, ooh, ooh! They searched the slope in vain, then slunk away toward Foolstown, tails between their legs, already inventing lies to excuse themselves. The governor. He was taken up to heaven alive. Meanwhile, Buratino checked himself, arms and legs all sound, and crawled to free Malvina and Pierrot. Without a word, Malvina threw her arms around him, though his long nose kept her from kissing him. Pierrot's sleeves were torn away, the powder gone from his cheeks, which were found to be rosy and quite ordinary, despite his poetic airs. "I fought like a lion," he declared gruffly. "If not for a trick, they'd never have caught me," Malvina confirmed. He fought bravely indeed. Then she embraced him and kissed both his cheeks. "Enough cuddling," grumbled Buratino. "We must run." Drag Artemon by the tail. Together they hauled the poor bandaged poodle up the slope. "Stop, stop! I can walk! This is humiliating!" he moaned. "No, no, you are too weak," they insisted. But as they struggled halfway up, at the top of the cliff, appeared Carabas Barabas and Duramar. Fox Alice pointed her paw. Cat Basilio bristled his whiskers with a hiss. "Ha ha ha! How neat!" laughed Carabas. "The golden key walks right into my hands." Buratino racked his brain for a plan. Pierrot clutched Malvina, ready to defend her to the last. This time there was no hope. Duramar snickered. "That sickly poodle, Signor Carabas. Give him to me. My leeches shall feast on his blood." Carabas, too lazy to climb down, wagged a sausage-like finger. "Come to me, children. Come." "Stand fast," shouted Buratino. "If we must die, let it be with laughter." Pierrot. "Recite your ugliest verses." Malvina. "Laugh as loud as you can." Malvina, true friend that she was, brushed away tears and burst into mocking laughter. Pierrot, pale but determined, declaimed in a wailing voice, "Pity poor Alice the fox. A stick awaits her box." Basilio, the thieving cat. A beggar, a scoundrel that. Duramar, our slimy fellow. A wrinkled, moldy mushroom yellow. And Carabas Barabas, "We're not afraid of you, alas!" Meanwhile, Buratino jeered and wagged his long nose. "Hey you, puppet master, fat beer barrel sack stuffed with nonsense. Come down here and I'll spit in your ragged beard." Carabas roared in fury. Duramar raised his bony arms to the sky. Alice sneered. "Shall we wring their necks, signor?" Another moment, and all would have been lost. But suddenly, swifts swooped overhead, whistling, "Here! Here! Here!" A magpie darted past, chattering, "Faster! Faster! Faster!" And at the cliff's edge appeared old Papa Carlo, his sleeves rolled up, a knotted staff in hand, brows furrowed. With his shoulder, he shoved Carabas, with his elbow, Duramar. With his stick struck Alice across the back, and with his boot kicked Basilio aside. Then, leaning forward, he called joyfully down to the puppets, "My son, Buratino, you little rascal, you're alive and well. Come to me at once." The sudden appearance of Carlo, his stout stick, and his knitted brows struck terror into the villains. Alice the fox slithered into the tall grass and darted away, pausing only now and then to shiver at the memory of the blow. Basilio the cat flung 10 steps aside, hissed furiously like a punctured bicycle tire. Duramar gathered the tails of his green coat and scrambled clumsily down the slope, muttering, "I've nothing to do with it, nothing at all." But on the steepest part he slipped, tumbled head over heels, and with a frightful splash landed in the pond. Carabas Barabas alone stood his ground. He merely drew his enormous head down into his shoulders, while his beard hung limply, like wet tow. Buratino, Piero, and Malvina climbed up the hill. Papa Carlo scooped them up one by one, wagged his finger at them. "Ah, you little mischief makers," and tucked them carefully into his shirt front. Then he stooped beside the wounded dog. Faithful Artemon raised his muzzle and licked Carlo on the nose. At once, Buratino popped his wooden face out from the shirt. "Papa Carlo, we won't go home without our dog." "Heh, heh," sighed Carlo. "He's heavy, but I'll manage somehow." He heaved Artemon onto his shoulder and puffed under the weight as he climbed back up, where still stood Carabas Barabas, head sunk, eyes bulging. "My puppets," the giant grumbled. Carlo's voice grew stern. "Shame on you. At your age you keep company with cheats the whole world knows. Duramar, the cat, the fox, and you bully children. For shame, doctor." Carlo turned toward the city, and Carabas Barabas, beard dragging, crept after him. "My puppets, give them back," he begged. "Never," cried Buratino, poking out from Carlo's shirt. So they went, step after step, passing the tavern Three Gudgeons, where a bald innkeeper bowed in the doorway, showing both hands toward his sizzling pans. Before the door strutted a rooster with a plucked tail, pacing back and forth and indignantly retelling Buratino's mischief. The hens clucked in sympathy. "Oh dear, what a fright! Oh heavens, our poor rooster." Carlo climbed a hill. From its top one could see the sea, streaked with silvery ripples of wind, and at the shore, a sun-bleached little town, and beyond it, the canvas roof of the puppet theater. Behind him, Carabas Barabas muttered, 3 paces away, "I'll give you 100 gold coins for the puppet. Sell him to me." Buratino, Malvina, and Piero held their breath, waiting, but Carlo replied firmly, "No. Were you a kind and honest director, I might entrust you with these little folk, but you are worse than a crocodile. I will neither give nor sell. Be gone." Down the hill Carlo went, no longer even glancing at the doctor, and entered the town. There, on the sun-scorched square, stood a policeman, motionless. From the heat and boredom his mustaches drooped, his eyelids stuck together, and flies circled lazily above his triangular hat. Suddenly, Carabas Barabas stuffed his beard into his pocket, seized Carlo by the shirt, and bellowed across the square, "Catch the thief! He has stolen my puppets." But the policeman, stifling in the heat, did not stir. Carabas ran up to him, demanding Carlo's arrest. "And who might you be?" the policeman drawled. "I am Doctor of Puppet Science, Director of the world-famous theater, Knight of the highest orders, trusted friend of the Tarabarian king, Signor Carabas Barabas." "Don't you raise your voice at me," answered the policeman lazily. While they quarreled, Papa Carlo tapped quickly with his stick along the paving stones and hurried into his lodging beneath the stairway. He unlocked the dim little room, laid Artemon gently on the bed, and set Buratino, Malvina, and Piero side by side upon the table. At once, Malvina exclaimed, "Papa Carlo, tend to the poor dog first." "Boys, straight to washing this minute." Then she clasped her hands in despair. "My dresses, my new shoes, my lovely ribbons, they're all lost in the ravine among the weeds." "Never mind," said Carlo gently. "I'll fetch your bundles this evening." He unwrapped Artemon's paws with care. The wounds had nearly healed. The dog could not move only because he was faint from hunger. "A dish of oatmeal gruel and a bone with marrow," groaned Artemon, "and I'm ready to fight every dog in town." "Alas, alas," sighed Carlo. "Not a crumb at home, not a penny in my pocket." Malvina sobbed softly. Piero rubbed his brow, thinking aloud. "I'll go to the street and recite verses. Passers-by will toss me coins." Carlo shook his head. "And spend the night in jail for vagrancy, my son?" "No." All grew downcast, save Buratino. He twisted about on the table, grinning slyly, as if sitting on a pin. "Enough of this whining!" he cried, leaping to the floor and pulling something from his pocket. "Papa Carlo, take a hammer. Pull down that shabby canvas from the wall." He pointed his long nose toward the painted hearth with its pot and painted smoke. Carlo was astonished. "Why strip away such a fine picture, son?" "In winter I look at it and imagine a real fire and a real stew with garlic, and I grow warmer." "Papa Carlo," said Buratino with solemn wooden dignity, "I give you my honest puppet's word. You shall have a true fire in the hearth, a real iron pot, and hot stew. Tear it down." So certain was his tone that Carlo scratched his head, grumbled, but fetched pliers and hammer. Behind the canvas, as we know, hung cobwebs and dead spiders. Carlo brushed them away, and there appeared a little oak door, darkened with age. At its corners were carved laughing faces, and in the center, a dancing figure with a long nose. When they wiped away the dust, Malvina, Piero, Carlo, and even the famished Artemon cried out as one, "It's Buratino himself!" "I knew it," said Buratino, though he hadn't known at all and was secretly astonished. "And here is the key." "Papa Carlo, unlock it." "This door and this golden key," murmured Carlo, "were made long ago by a skillful hand. Let us see what lies within." He turned the key. A soft, sweet music rang out, as though a tiny organ inside a music box had begun to play. Carlo pushed, and with a creak, the little door began to open. Just then, hurried footsteps sounded outside, and the voice of Carabas Barabas roared, "In the name of the Tarabarian king, arrest that rogue Carlo." As we know, Carabas Barabas tried in vain to persuade the drowsy policeman to arrest Carlo. Getting nowhere, he dashed off down the street. His flapping beard caught on buttons and umbrellas of passers-by. He shoved, gnashed his teeth, while boys whistled after him, pelting his back with rotten apples. Carabas Barabas burst into the mayor's garden. At that sultry hour, the mayor sat by the fountain, clad only in striped shorts, sipping lemonade. His 6 chins quivered, his nose sank into rosy cheeks. Behind him, beneath a linden tree, 4 gloomy policemen busied themselves, uncorking yet more bottles of lemonade. Throwing himself on his knees before the mayor, Carabas Barabas smeared his tears into his beard and wailed, "I am a poor orphan. I have been wronged, robbed, beaten." "Who wronged you, poor orphan?" the mayor asked, puffing. "My worst enemy, the old hurdy-gurdy man Carlo. He has stolen my 3 finest puppets. He plans to burn my famous theater, and soon he'll set the whole town ablaze and rob it, unless he is arrested at once." To strengthen his tale, Carabas Barabas poured a handful of gold coins into the mayor's slipper. He lied and rambled so artfully that the frightened mayor ordered the 4 policemen beneath the linden. "Go with this respectable orphan and do what must be done in the name of the law." Off Carabas Barabas ran, dragging the 4 policemen toward Carlo's little room under the stairs, shouting, "In the name of the Tarabarian king, arrest the thief and scoundrel." But the doors were shut. No answer came from inside. "By the king's name, break it down," he barked. The policemen pushed. The rotten halves of the door fell from their hinges, and all 4, clattering swords, tumbled noisily into the dark little chamber. It was the very moment when Carlo, bent low, slipped through the secret door in the wall. He was the last to vanish. Clink! The door snapped shut, the gentle music ceased. Only dirty bandages and a ragged canvas with the painted hearth lay strewn in the room. Carabas Barabas lunged at the hidden door, pounded with fists and heels, tra-ta-ta-ta, but the door held firm. He took a running start and rammed it with his backside. Still it would not yield. He whirled on the policeman, bellowing, "Smash this cursed door! In the name of the king!" The policeman, rubbing bumps and bruises, muttered, "No, this is too hard a job." And off they went to report that all had been done according to the law. Yet the old hurdy-gurdy man was clearly aided by the devil himself, for he had vanished through a wall. Carabas tore at his beard, collapsed on the floor, and began to howl, wail, and roll like a madman about the empty little chamber beneath the stairs. While Carabas rolled on the floor, howling and tearing at his beard, Buratino was already leading the way down a steep stone staircase into the underground passage. Behind him followed Malvina, Piero, Artemon, and last of all, Papa Carlo, holding a stub of candle. Its wavering flame threw huge shadows from Artemon's shaggy head, or Pierrot's outstretched hand, yet could not pierce the darkness that swallowed the stairway below. Malvina, to keep from bursting into tears, pinched her own ears. Piero, quite out of place as always, murmured verses under his breath. "Shadows dance along the wall, nothing here can scare at all. Steep the stairs and dark the night, still the path will lead to light." Buratino hurried far ahead, his white cap barely visible deep below. Suddenly something hissed, tumbled, rolled, and his plaintive cry rang out, "Help! To me!" In a flash, Artemon, forgetting hunger and wounds, bowled over Malvina and Piero and stormed down the steps like a black whirlwind. His teeth snapped, something squealed horribly, and then silence. Only Malvina's heart ticked loudly, like an alarm clock. A wide beam of light flared upward from below, turning Papa Carlo's candle flame yellow. "Come! Quickly, look!" Buratino called. Malvina scrambled backward down the steps, Piero hopped after, and Papa Carlo came last, stooping, his wooden clogs slipping at every step. At the bottom, on the stone landing, sat Artemon, licking his chops. At his feet lay the strangled rat, Shushara. Buratino, with both hands, lifted a rag of rotted felt that veiled an opening in the wall. From it streamed a soft blue light. The first thing they saw as they crept through was sunlight, broad golden beams slanting from a round window high in a vaulted ceiling. Dust motes danced in the light, revealing a circular chamber of pale yellow marble, and in its center stood a puppet theater of marvelous beauty. Across its curtain gleamed a golden lightning bolt. On either side of the curtain rose painted towers of tiny bricks, their high tin roofs shining green. A clock with bronze hands was set into the left tower, its dial ringed with smiling faces of boys and girls. In the right tower, a round window of colored glass glowed like a jewel. Perched above that window, on the green roof, sat the talking cricket. As the company gaped, the cricket spoke slowly and clearly. "I warned you, Buratino, that terrible dangers awaited you. It is well that all ended happily, yet it might have ended otherwise. So," his voice was old and faintly offended. After all, once upon a time, he had been struck on the head with a hammer, and even 100 years of kindness could not erase that slight. So he said no more, twitched his whiskers as if dusting them, and crawled away into a lonely crack, far from bustle. Papa Carlo sighed. "And I thought, at least, we should find a chest of gold and silver. Yet here is nothing but an old toy." He tapped the clock's dial with his fingernail. Seeing a key hanging on a copper nail at its side, he wound the clock. A loud ticking began. The hands turned. The big hand struck 12, the little 6. Inside the tower something hummed and hissed. Then the clock rang out 6 strokes. At once, the colored window of the right tower flew open. Out popped a wind-up bird, wings fluttering. It sang 6 times, "Come to us, come to us." Then the window closed, a hurdy-gurdy tune began, and the curtain slowly rose. No one, not even Papa Carlo, had ever seen such scenery. A garden appeared. On little trees with golden and silver leaves sat toy starlings, each no larger than a fingernail, singing sweetly. One tree bore apples no bigger than buckwheat grains. Peacocks strolled beneath, nibbling the apples on tiptoe. 2 kids butted each other on the lawn. Tiny butterflies, scarcely visible, fluttered in the air. After a minute, the starlings fell silent, the peacocks and kids withdrew, and the trees sank into hidden traps in the stage floor. On the backdrop, gauzy clouds parted to reveal a red sun over a sandy desert. From the wings, coiled vines like snakes. Upon one, indeed, a boa constrictor swayed. Upon another, a family of monkeys swung by their tails. It was Africa. Across the sand marched beasts. A lion bounded in 3 leaps. Though no bigger than a kitten, he was fierce. A plush bear waddled on hind legs with an umbrella. An ugly crocodile slithered by, his little eyes feigning kindness. Artemon growled, unconvinced. A rhinoceros clattered past, a rubber ball fixed on his horn for safety. A giraffe trotted, striped and horned, neck stretched desperately long. Then came an elephant, children's friend, wise, good-natured, swaying his trunk, in which he carried a soy sweet. Last of all, scuttled a filthy jackal. Artemon lunged with a furious bark. Papa Carlo barely held him back by the tail. The beasts vanished. The sun went dark. Strange shapes lowered from above, slid in from the sides. A bow scraped a string, then pale street lamps glowed. The stage became a city square. Tiny folk burst from houses, crowded into a toy tram. The conductor rang, the driver spun a handle, a boy clung to a sausage, a policeman whistled, and the tram rattled off between high buildings. A cyclist rode past on wheels no larger than jam saucers. A newsboy dashed by, his papers no bigger than calendar slips. An ice cream man wheeled his cart across the square. Girls waved from balconies, but he spread his hands. All gone, come again tomorrow. The curtain fell. Once more, the golden zigzag of lightning gleamed. Papa Carlo, Malvina, and Pierrot stood spellbound. Buratino, hands in pockets, nose in the air, boasted, "Well, you see, not for nothing I risked myself in Tortilla's swamp. Here we'll stage a comedy. Do you know which? The Golden Key, or The Extraordinary Adventures of Buratino and His Friends. Carabas Barabas will burst with envy." Piero rubbed his wrinkled forehead. "I shall write the play in splendid verse." "I shall sell ice cream and tickets," said Malvina. "And if you find I have talent, perhaps play the parts of sweet young girls." "But children," asked Papa Carlo, "when shall you study?" All answered at once, "In the mornings we'll learn, and in the evenings we'll play." "Well, well," chuckled Papa Carlo, "and I shall grind the hurdy-gurdy for our worthy public. If we travel through Italy town by town, I'll drive the horse and cook mutton stew with garlic." Artemon listened with pricked ear, eyes shining, asking what role he should take. Buratino declared, "Artemon shall be keeper of props and costumes. He'll have the keys to the storeroom, and during shows he may roar like a lion, stomp like a rhinoceros, snap crocodile teeth, howl like the wind, by wagging his tail most swiftly." "And you, Buratino?" asked all. "What will you be in the theater?" "You silly ones," he laughed. "Why, I shall play myself in the comedy and become famous all over the world." Carabas Barabas sat in front of the hearth in a foul mood. The damp logs barely smoldered. Outside, the rain poured. The puppet theater's leaky roof dripped. The puppets' hands and feet had become damp. During rehearsals, no one wanted to work, even under threat of the 7-tailed whip. For 3 days, the puppets had eaten nothing and whispered ominously in the storage room, hanging on their nails. Since morning, not a single ticket had sold. And who would want to watch Carabas Barabas's boring plays with hungry, ragged actors? The city clock struck 6. Carabas Barabas trudged grimly to the auditorium, empty. "Curse all the esteemed audience," he grumbled and stepped outside. He blinked, gaped so wide a crow could have flown in. Opposite his theater, before a large new canvas tent, a crowd had gathered, ignoring the damp sea wind. At the tent's entrance, on a platform, a long-nosed little man in a cap blew a squeaky trumpet and shouted something. The audience laughed, clapped, and many entered the tent. Duramar approached Carabas Barabas. He smelled stronger than ever of swamp. "Eh, hey, he said, puckering his face into sour wrinkles. No business with medicinal leeches? I just want to go to them, he pointed at the new tent. Ask to light candles or sweep the floor. Whose cursed theater is this? Where did it come from? Barabbas growled. The puppets themselves opened the lightning theater, Duramar said. They write their own plays in verse and perform them too. Barabbas ground his teeth, yanked at his beard, and marched toward the new tent. Over its entrance, Buratino shouted, "The first performance of an entertaining, fascinating comedy from the life of wooden men. A true tale of how we defeated all our enemies through wit, courage, and presence of mind." At the puppet theater's entrance, Malvina, with a pretty bow in her blue hair, sat in a glass booth, struggling to hand tickets to those eager to see the funny puppet play. Papa Carlo, in a new velvet jacket, turned his hurdy-gurdy and winked cheerfully at the respectable audience. Ardemon dragged Alice the fox by the tail, who had sneaked in without a ticket. Basilio the cat, also ticketless, had fled and sat in a tree, glaring down. Buratino puffed out his cheeks and blew through the squeaky trumpet. "The show begins!" He ran down the little staircase to perform the first scene of the comedy, where poor Papa Carlo carves a little wooden man from a log, unaware that it will bring him happiness. Last to arrive was the turtle Tortilla, holding an honorary ticket on parchment with golden corners. The performance began. Barabbas trudged back to his empty theater. He grabbed the seven-tailed whip and unlocked the storage room. "I'll teach you, you scoundrels, to stop being lazy," he growled fiercely. "I'll show you how to attract an audience." He cracked the whip, but no one answered. The storeroom was empty. Only scraps of rope hung on nails. All the puppets, Harlequin, the girls in black masks, wizards in pointed starry hats, hunchbacks with cucumber noses, Moors, dogs, every single one had escaped from Barabbas. With a terrifying howl, he dashed into the street. He saw his last actors fleeing through puddles to the new theater, where music played cheerfully, laughter rang out, and applause resounded. Barabbas only managed to grab the little baize dog with button eyes, but out of nowhere, Ardemon pounced on him, knocked him down, snatched the dog, and dashed off with it into the tent, where behind the scenes a hot mutton stew with garlic awaited the hungry actors. And so Barabbas was left sitting in a puddle in the rain. And that was the story of Buratino, a brave little wooden boy whose kindness, cleverness, and courage helped him find the golden key and open the door to happiness. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more wonderful fairy tales. See you in the next story.